Welcome back in as we get you ready for an NBA slate. We anticipate 6 games. You never know what the hell is going to happen here with COVID wreaking havoc across all sports, and the NBA is no exception. Myself and Matt, as we have you for the next 25, Yahoo specific. So we'll do both the deeper dive and live before lock, specifically with Yahoo, and then you'll get the extended version of the deeper dive following live before lock right up until the slate locks tonight. Myself, Matt Jordan's producing. We appreciate you hanging, already hitting that thumbs up button, already hanging with us. So let's get to it, my friend. And, this has been very difficult for everybody to navigate, from a DFS to betting to just expectation of who the hell's playing standpoint. So we understand that it's not easy for you or anybody else to navigate these slates.
Yeah, I mean, the good news recently has been that we kind of know in advance who's in and out, with a few exceptions. But tonight's slate is going to be a little bit different. We have a lot of questionable tags, with 2.5 hours essentially to go until lineup lock. And there's some big names. We have Joel Embiid questionable. We have Jason Tatum and Dennis Schroeder questionable. We have Ja questionable. Rashawn Holmes questionable. So there's plenty to monitor tonight. Could be a good night to, if you're like me, it's cold out. So just bundle up, stay glued to the news, maybe watch a little football, switch over to the hoops, and keep your lineups, in the back of your mind, ready to make adjustments.
So we are going to go through position by position and kind of get everybody a deeper look, if you will, at who to go to on the 6-game slate. But I am curious with a couple of things up in the air. You mentioned what we're dealing with specifically in that Sixers-Celtics game with Embiid and Tatum, the two biggest names in the game, respectively, coming in questionable. What game individually are you targeting, do you think, where you're going to get the most exposure to?
Yeah, I mean, we have one game that really stands out from a Vegas perspective. The Jazz and the Hornets right now, total on that game, 237.5. That's the type of total that we've become accustomed to in years past, but we haven't really seen a lot of 230 plus totals this season so far. So that game is at 237.5. The next game on the slate is the Rockets and the Bulls. That's at 222.5. So we're talking, 15 additional points in that game. Now, there is a 12.5 point spread, so there are some blowout concerns, but if you're going to stack a game, I think that's the clear candidate. You have to hope that the Hornets can keep it competitive, but if that happens, there should be plenty of fantasy scoring on both sides here.
All right, man, let's dive into it here. And again, we get you ready for everything you need to know. You see in the back there, the injury report is out each and every day. That's free for you. So make sure that you're paying attention to everything that we have available on site to go along with these shows that we have. So let's jump in the point guard spot here. Steph's going to be clearly the pay up option. You mentioned Ball as well. We have Murray. Well, technically 3 guys really from a cost standpoint. Ball and Curry going to be the same price here. So depending on how you want to maneuver throughout the slate, you may want to allocate a lot of funds to 1 or 2 of these guys. We've had a lot of conversation. I feel like as much as the Sixers and maybe Knicks to a lesser extent have popped up on our slates here, Matt, DeJounte Murray, I feel like, in the Spurs are playing every time you and I talk as well, and you've been pretty high on him. So knowing that you've got Curry and Ball there, is Murray still a pretty high guy that you're getting exposure to tonight? Knowing, of course, that you have a bunch of other guys, even cheaper options like Maxie and Schroeder, who are still game time decisions.
Yeah, I have some Murray, but he would be the third in terms of my priority as far as paying up at the position. Steph is expected to be the highest owned guy. He's got roughly 38% projected ownership, but it's just kind of hard to get away from him with Jordan Poole and Wiggins both out of the lineup tonight. That's a lot of, shots leaving the Warriors rotation. So I think it's pretty natural to assume that Curry's going to get some of those. He's averaged 1.51 fantasy points per minute with both guys off the court this season. So I think he's a strong pay up. 45 is pretty cheap for him on Yahoo relative to what he is at other sites throughout the industry. So I think paying up for Curry on Yahoo specifically makes a ton of sense. But I also really like LaMelo as a pivot right? I just mentioned that Charlotte Utah game and how it is expected to be the highest scoring of the day. We have LaMelo projected for less than 1% ownership right now. So I will be overweight on LaMelo. I don't think I'm going to be going crazy, but I think 10-15%, on a guy who's projected for less than 1% ownership is pretty reasonable.
Yeah. So moving past really that top area, you're still saving some money, even going to like an SGA at $33. We have the other ball in Lonzo there at 27. I mentioned the two guys who are kind of that mid to low $20 options in Schroeder and Maxie. And I guess that's not just dependent on them playing, but also who else around them is playing. So I don't know, Marcus Smart at 21, maybe that's just a little too high. Paul George, the issue there as far as consumption of other people picking up Reggie Jackson maybe seems like a pretty decent option at $21. Where are you looking at more of that mid-range?
Yeah, with no George, that's a big piece of news. If he's out, then certainly we can go back to Reggie Jackson. He has been sort of their, primary scorer with George off the court this season. So I think that that's totally fair. There are plenty of injuries, though, to keep in mind, right? Point guard is a position that is kind of going to be pretty volatile today, right?
Yeah.
If you have the 76ers, if Embiid is out, then you can look at some of the Philly guys. One situation that may be flying on a little bit under the radar, you've got Armoni Brooks questionable. If he's out, then a guy like DJ Augustine becomes kind of interesting at the absolute minimum. Schroeder is interesting. Kobe White, somebody that I really like tonight. Our projections like him as well. He's $11. That Bulls team still without Zach LaVine, still without a few key rotation pieces. So he's somebody that could take on a pretty big workload here. Overall, like, this is a position where there are a lot of different options that you can kind of consider.
All right, so let's move to the two here. And we mentioned George LaVine as well. So you're really getting to Donovan Mitchell. What's really interesting is at $26, if Jason Tatum doesn't go, I think Jalen Brown now becomes a super value option.
Yeah, Brown was somebody that the minutes have, started to tick up a little bit, right? He was limited to under 30 in his first game back, but he's up closer to that 33 range now. And he can pay off this salary in 30 minutes. So anything more than that is just gravy. And if you get a situation where they're without Schroeder, they're without Jason Tatum, he might be forced to play, 35, 36, even upwards of 38 type minutes. So certainly I would expect him to become the chalk in that situation, especially with this game being, the first game of the night. You don't really have to take a stand. You can wait, see what the injury report looks like, and then make your call on Jalen. But if the Celtics guys are in, then I would expect Tyrese Halliburton to be, pretty heavy chalk. With the Kings situation, no De'Aaron Fox again, no Davion Mitchell. So Halliburton has been doing pretty much everything for the Kings without those two guys recently. 3 straight games with at least 43 fantasy points. 2 straight games with double doubles. Like, he's a good player. And when he's asked to do more, he's been able to live up to that. So I would expect Halliburton to be the chalk, with the exception that the Celtics rule out some of their guys.
So we have a couple of mid-range guys, and I don't know, looking at that Houston Bulls game, especially with the expectation of it being fast-paced and some higher scoring. Caruso sits there at 18, but I know you mentioned Brooks as well. There is another guy, and we're just looking at now without Jordan Poole for Golden State. I wonder how much Lee bumps up at $10. You start to look at some punt/value plays. Normally they may just be punts, but because of COVID and because of guys that are hurt, they actually bump up to pretty much value now and not just throw away in a punt standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, Damien Lee is interesting because even if he plays, 35 minutes tonight, I'm not sure he has much upside, even at $10, right? He's averaged under 0.7 fantasy points per minute this season. So can he return value at $10? Sure. But can he provide a tournament winning ceiling at that price tag, I'm not necessarily all that convinced. I would rather go up a tier and, like Luke Kennard, if there's no Paul George, him at $14. I think that's a much better play. He's shown us the ceiling recently. I mean, he had almost 43 fantasy points in his last game. If you go even up one step from that, you've got Buddy Hield at 19, going to be asked to do a lot of scoring with the Kings injury situation. So I don't see shooting guard as a position where I'm going like all the way down tonight. I think that you're better off going to the lower middle end of the pricing spectrum or paying up for, like a Donovan Mitchell or somebody like that.
See, I didn't even bring up Seth Curry. I was just ready to move on. I've learned my lesson, man. Let's look at the three. Tatum is big. Let's assume Tatum is in. And look, this isn't coming back from COVID. This is an ankle injury. And we do factor that in clearly a physical injury here. You mentioned Brown, the minutes increasing there. So it would be reasonable to think, or at least expect, I would say, that if Tatum plays through this ankle injury and what you mentioned with Brown, that there could be some, even if it's a little bit, there could be some regression tonight against the Sixers.
Yeah, it's the matchup, I think, that scares me a little bit more than anything else. Like, this isn't a bad price tag for Tatum. It might be a smidge high with Brown, rounding back into form, but this game has the lowest total on the slate, 213.5 points. The Celtics are near the bottom end of implied team total tonight. It just doesn't seem like a spot where you want to pay up for Jason Tatum with some of the other studs who are in great spots. Like we'll talk about some of the other players later, but Curry and Mitchell and, the guys we've talked about at the guard spot, I would prioritize them over paying up for a Jason Tatum.
All right. So there's a pretty big price break from Tatum and even Hayward, assuming going through everything here from an injury standpoint. We know Wiggins out, but more so a matter of how significant the price gap is. If you're willing to move past the 46 for Tatum, you can start to be a little flexible here. So how low are you going when you're starting to take on maybe more of a value play? Clippers were hot earlier in a couple of positions. So man at $14 may seem appealing, or maybe you go a little lower and continue to take advantage of guys who are out in time. Paul Reed could be getting 25 to 30 minutes tonight on the Sixers, Matt.
Yeah, I'll pass on Paul Reed, but Javonte Green sounds good to me at $10.
There you go.
He's got to play a lot of minutes for the Bulls right now. He gave them 34 and change in their last game. Comparing him to a guy like a Damien Lee, I like his per minute upside a little bit more. So I would rather, eat the chalk with him as a value play than with Lee. But certainly Terrence Mann is in play if we get no Paul George. I think you can play Eric Gordon again at 14. There are some other sort of value plays that are looking good here. And then in the mid range, Dillon Brooks and Harrison Barnes both figure to be pretty popular. Brooks, I would expect not so much if Ja returns, but if Ja's out, Brooks is coming off a huge game in his last outing. Nearly 35 minutes, 36% usage rate. So I would expect Brooks to be pretty popular if Ja sits again.
All right. Sounds good, man. So we'll keep it moving here. Anybody else you want to mention before we hit the 4?
No, I think that's a pretty good overview of the position.
Okay. So we'll hit the 4, the 5 before we get out of here. And again, a reminder, the full deeper dive coming your way in less than 10 minutes. And also hit that thumbs up, please, if you haven't already, and make sure you're subscribed. Look, we continue to build this monster channel here, so we need all of your help. Make sure you're subscribed by all means. And then look, the links below from Yahoo. I know we're doing this Yahoo specific show, but we have these links for you for a reason, to give back $10 free just to play whatever you want to do. One contest, you want to build it up with a couple of cheaper contests, take that $10, do whatever you want with it. And also, right below that, if you're new, I saw a couple of people in the chat asking Matt about the benefits of playing at Yahoo versus a couple of other sites. And you do a great job when we talk about value and pricing, looking at where a guy, especially on Yahoo, may jump out. So if you're new, then look, we're going to give you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum if you sign up to Yahoo. All right, man, let's hit the 4 here. DeRozan's right there at the top. Couple of guys, really, DeRozan and Bridges are the 2 guys in the 30 range. You could, if you wanted to, you could save a little money, go to Tobias Harris at $28. He's one of the lucky ones on Philadelphia who's not dealing with either injury or COVID.
You could. I won't, but you could. For me, this is DeMar DeRozan pretty clearly. Guy was awesome without LaVine in their last game. Usage rate over 40%. I wouldn't expect it to be quite that high today, but he's at 36.5% with LaVine off the court in general this season. So I wouldn't expect his usage to plummet either. 1.34 fantasy points per minute with LaVine off the court. He's just simply too cheap, given the Bulls' rotation at the moment, especially in a great matchup versus the Rockets. Rockets have been the fastest paced team all season. So I expect there to be plenty of fantasy scoring to go around for the Bulls, and DeRozan should be their top guy.
All right. So anybody else that you'd like to move out away from, look, because from rostership to just a cheaper pivot, we can look at a couple of other guys here a little bit below that you'd be getting to, especially if you're building larger lineups throughout the night. Larger amount, I should say.
I think Metu is going to be sort of the chalk if you're paying down. The Kings pretty banged up in the front court at the moment. You know, we've talked about some of their backcourt absences, but they're going to be without Marvin Bagley. They're going to be without Alex Len. So there's minutes for Metu there. The big thing is Rashawn Holmes. If he comes back, I would be less interested in him. He's questionable, so make sure to monitor that. I really like Otto Porter Jr. at the minimum.
Yeah.
You know, he's not expected to command nearly as much ownership as Metu, but I think he might be the better play at $10, right? We talk about no Wiggins and no Jordan Poole. Some of those minutes, I think, funnel their way towards Porter. And Porter is just a really good per minute producer. He's at 0.9 fantasy points per minute this season. He's capable of being even better than that. So I would expect, 25 to maybe even upwards of 30 minutes tonight. And if he plays that much, I really like his chances of being a GPP winning piece at just $10.
Awesome. All right. So let's look now, a couple of options here at the 5 as we wind down. And again, here coming up, we have a bunch of things happening. I know the NFL action here, but we have you covered across the board for all of the NBA content. So from us, it's going to be Josh and Adam, and then you have Greg and Terry. So we've got you taken care of entirely, 5:30 to 6:30, Josh and Adam, then Greg and Terry live before lock up to 7:30. All right, man, let's do it here. Embiid is out there. I was going to say out there, like on the floor.
So, you're breaking news now,
No. He's out there. I'm trying to get word here locally to see what's going on, but it's tough, man. These guys are tight-lipped where you could get Embiid out 15 minutes before tip, and you shouldn't be surprised by any means. I have no idea what the hell's going on. His abdomen is hurt. His ankle is hurt. His ego is hurt that he's not going to win the MVP this year, Matt. So there are a lot of factors going into Embiid. There's no real need to play and show up, Kevin Durant or something like that. I wouldn't be shocked if he sat tonight, but if he does play, $49, how much are you getting to Embiid? A somewhat healthy enough Embiid to play.
If he's going to play, I will be overweight on him. If you look at just the studs on this slate, I think that Embiid might have the highest ceiling. Like Curry, it's either him or Curry, and Curry's going to catch a ton of ownership, and Embiid could fly a bit under the radar. So if he's active, I'll have him. He's upped his production to 1.52 fantasy points per minute over the past month. We've kind of been talking about him, looking a little bit better. The usage rate is coming up. He's been playing well recently. So anytime that I can get him at low ownership, I'm going to be interested in doing it. And especially like you look at this next tier down, I think the $30 centers, they're going to command the vast majority of the ownership tonight at the position.
All right, so let's look at that because I think that's a good way as we wind down here the final couple of minutes or so. Difference clearly between 49 and even Gobert at 38. You have a couple of guys in that 30 range. Wood, mentioned you're targeting a lot from that Houston Bulls game. So you've got Vooch and Wood there in that low 30 option. And then it kind of opens up as far as, where you really want to go. Even like Jakob Pertl, you've got some options there, 23. I know Odd Shopper is huge. Anybody using that, they should be. If you're betting player props, Odd Shopper is all over Pertl, going over a couple, including rebounds. So take that, use that out there if you're placing a wager. So where to begin on that kind of mid-range counter to Embiid?
Yeah, I mean, Vooch is the guy we have projected right now for 43.6% ownership. That's going to be one of the top marks on the slate, if not the top mark on the slate. And to be honest, I'm not that interested in him with that in mind, right? We did not see the same boost for Vucevic with LaVine out of the lineup in their last game that we saw for DeRozan, right? His usage rate was still just 21% in their last game. He gave us around 40 fantasy points, but I don't mind fading Vooch if he's going to be a 40 fantasy point player, right? You look at the per minute numbers with LaVine off the court. Vooch is at 1.15 fantasy points per minute. He's averaged 1.13 fantasy points per minute in general this season. So very, very minor bump with no LaVine. I don't expect him to be as big of a beneficiary as the rest of the industry apparently seems to think. So I will be underweight and possibly very underweight on Vucevic at his current ownership projection. I would rather funnel that ownership towards Gobert, who has the potential to just feast on the interior against the Hornets.
Awesome. Appreciate everybody hanging with us by all means. Again, the full deeper dive coming your way in a couple of minutes, and then live before lock. We'll get you ready. Everything up to 7:30 Eastern at Matt LaMarca on Twitter, at Shander Show. For me, Jordan, thank you, sir. He's not going anywhere like you aren't going anywhere. Hit that thumbs up button, please. And make sure you're subscribed. Really, that thumbs up button. We appreciate you hanging with us for the Yahoo. Hopefully, you're taking advantage of everything here from a Yahoo point of view, and you're hitting those links below the $10 free and 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right, brother. We'll do it again Thursday.
Sounds good.
Mike's live. Merry Christmas, everybody. And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. It is Monday, December 20th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scher. We are brought to you by Yahoo, and we're doing it again, running it back from this morning. 6 games, and it looks like all 6 of them are still on the slate. So let's chalk that up as a victory since this morning. We've got a ton to talk about. Some news has popped up that's kind of changed the slate a little bit, so we'll dig into that. Before we do anything, though, for the 800 and something amount of people that are in here right now, hit that like button. It's the holiday season. Give the gift of likes to everyone because they are free, and there's nothing easier than giving away free gifts. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. Adam, how much has changed for you in the past 5 hours or whatever the hell it's been since we've talked?
Not too much, I don't think. I'm trying to think about, Hayward. I was trying to figure out like what news you're even referring to. But yeah, not too much right now. Like we're still waiting on a lot of the stuff that we were waiting for this morning.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and dig into it now because we know that there are some of these teams that we certainly need to talk about a lot. And we are going to kick that off with a team that, well, honestly, we don't have a lot to talk about as of right now, at the very least. Philadelphia 76ers, 3-point dogs in Boston, 213.5 total. We have no news on Joel Embiid, no news on Danny Green, and no news on Tyrese Maxey, to my knowledge. Am I wrong in that assessment?
No.
Okay. We have no Ben Simmons, Shake Milton, George Niang, Andre Drummond, Furkan Korkmaz, or Jaden Springer. And that's not even like the most ridiculous one ever, but we can dive in right now. Let's start with someone that's going to be in one way or the other. 7K Tobias Harris on FanDuel projected for 30% ownership. $8,700 Tobias Harris on DraftKings projected for 5% ownership. I'm assuming you're not all that interested in Tobias Harris. Would those guys being out change that dramatically for you?
If Embiid's out, my opinion changes. Like he's still expensive. I would say he's kind of priced for Embiid to be out. If Embiid's in, it's really difficult to pay that DraftKings price. But without Embiid on the floor this year, Harris has averaged 1.12 DraftKings points per minute. He sees a bump in usage. He just has a bigger role overall. He's only played 71 minutes without either of Embiid or Drummond, but over those minutes, he's averaged 1.28 DraftKings points per minute, 29.6% usage rate, 14% rebounding percentage, 22% assist percentage. He is still risky at 8,700, but if Embiid's out, I mean, this offense has to run through Harris.
Yeah, you would think so. And obviously, he just looks even better on FanDuel at that 7K price tag, which is a dream here. What are your thoughts on Embiid and Maxey on a day like today? Does it really matter all that much to you? 11-6 for Embiid. We know we have a lot of center talent on this slate at multiple price ranges. Maxey, 6,900 is a pretty healthy price tag for him. I don't know how much better he looks with Embiid gone in this spot, but are you getting to Embiid or Maxey?
I think that Embiid looks fine if he's in. It's tough for him to compete with Steph Curry, but if you can get to Embiid, then by all means, he's likely to play 33, 34 minutes if he's in. We know he's a really good fantasy producer. Maxey becomes kind of interesting just because he's likely to play a lot of minutes here if he's in, assuming he's healthy. Without Embiid on the floor this year, Maxey's averaged a fantasy point per minute. That goes down a little bit if Embiid's in. But 2 games ago, we saw Maxey play 42 minutes. If he's able to go today, I expect a lot of playing time for him again. At 6,900 on DraftKings, it's still not a great price tag, but assuming the ownership's not going to be very high, I don't mind getting there in tournaments. And then, he just looks better if Embiid is out.
So what can we do with the rest of this team? Curry and Danny Green are going to be the first 2 guys up. Well, Danny Green, if he plays. Curry, assuming he doesn't just suddenly get COVID in the next hour. You never know with the NBA right now. These guys should play big minutes if they are in. Do you have interest in these guys? Danny Green in particular, 3,800 on DraftKings, stands out if he's able to make it today and get on the court.
Yeah, I agree with Green in particular. He started last game, moved back into the starting lineup ahead of Matisse Thybulle, and then played 39.8 minutes. So it's not even like he just went back to the starting lineup and played his normal 26, 27 minutes. He played a ton. Korkmaz and Niang being out certainly makes his playing time, or should make his playing time, a little bit more secure. He's not a great fantasy producer by any stretch, but for the season, he's averaged 0.71 DraftKings points per minute. If he's going to play 36 plus minutes, that just kind of ends up looking like a pretty good option. And it's a situation where, we have some really popular guys that we'll get to later that are cheap, but in particular, like Javonte Green from Chicago, who we'll talk about. I think he's a great value, one of the best on the slate, but he's going to get a lot of ownership. While right now we have Danny Green projected at 7%. So I think that sort of makes Green interesting in tournaments. They're both guys that don't do a lot when they're on the floor, but they're both likely to be on the floor quite a bit.
The highest projected owned guy on Philly right now is Embiid at 7.3%. In the aggregate, 31 total percentage points of ownership going to Philadelphia. If everybody is in, are they somehow underrepresented in GPPs?
Maybe a little bit.
Okay.
Like on DraftKings, I think you could make a case for Green. Right now, we have Embiid being a little bit underowned, 11% chance of being in the optimal 7% ownership. Maxie, kind of the same thing, but his ownership, like right now, we have him at 1%. If he's in, it's going to be higher than 1%, but we have him with an 11% chance of being in the optimal. So even if you say, call it 6, 7, 8%, he's still going a little bit underowned. So I think, yes, in the sense that they are less popular than their optimal lineup percentage dictates, but also sort of no, in the sense that even though they're going a little bit underowned, none of these guys have higher than like an 11% chance of being in the optimal. So they're probably not really guys that you necessarily want to be jamming into a ton of lineups.
One keynote that we didn't have earlier today that we do have now, Charles Bassey is no longer on the injury report as with the G League team. So if Joel Embiid happens to be out, what are your thoughts? How many minutes are we getting out of $3,500 Charles Bassey?
I think Bassey plays. I don't know how many minutes, but I think he certainly plays enough to be a strong option. He's played a total of 108 minutes this season. He's averaged 1.15 DraftKings points per minute, 20.2% rebounding percentage. The really important number there. We know that rebounding is typically a little bit more stable than relying on guys to make shots and all of that. And he's cheap. So I don't know. I assume you would have Paul Reed behind him. You also could have Harris play small. If they don't want to give 48 total minutes to Bassey and Reed, but there's no real reason that it couldn't be 28 Bassey, 20 Reed or something like that, 26, 22, whatever. Long story short, I think at 3,500, he ends up looking phenomenal if Embiid's out.
If Embiid is out, who's more interesting to you, Charles Bassey or Paul Reed?
Charles
Paul Reed,
Bassey.
power forward eligible as well, flat minimum.
Charles Bassey.
Okay. Close?
Sort of. I mean, Reed's at 0.91 DraftKings points per minute this year. Bassey's at 1.15. I think just based on what we've kind of seen in the past when they've been shorthanded at center, I think Bassey's ahead of Reed. So I'm saying all of this under the assumption that Bassey starts. If Reed starts, then clearly my answer is Reed. But if Bassey starts, I would just feel better because I think that's a signal that they're planning to play him more minutes. And then with Reed, there's still, especially if we assume that Green and Maxie are in, there's still ways that they can go where Reed doesn't have to play a ton of minutes. And there's been a lot of situations this year where like they could give Reed playing time and they seem to find other things to do. So I'd have some concerns. If you take out Embiid and Maxie and Green, then they just both look really good because you're getting to a point where it's just like, yeah, okay, they have to play, everybody that they can, as many minutes as they can.
Isaiah Joe is actually pulling a little bit of ownership. The second highest owned guy on Philly right now, 7%. I don't really have much to add there. You probably need to see one of Maxie or Green out for that to be really, really good. For right now, he's just sort of a backup to me. I'm not entirely sure that I'd be all that interested.
Yeah, the way I see it right now, like if you look at their last game, Danny Green was in, Milton was in, Maxie was out, and Matisse Thybulle was in. So I think you can kind of look at it as a similar situation here. Milton played 34 minutes. I think Maxie would play more than that. At the same time, Green played 40 minutes. He probably plays less than that today. Isaiah Joe played 25 minutes. I think it's very reasonable if everyone is in to assume that Joe plays somewhere around 24, 25 minutes. He's averaged 0.64 DraftKings points per minute this year. It kind of puts him in the category where if you need a 3K flyer at relatively low ownership, then sure, he's going to project around 6X, but he's not a priority in that he's likely to score like 18 to 20 DraftKings points, and who really cares?
What would it take for you to be interested in Matisse Thybulle today?
Him to be the only player on the Sixers.
Danny Green out for sure, right?
Yeah. I mean, in all seriousness, he's 3,300, so it wouldn't take a lot, especially at low ownership. He played 18 minutes last game. He's kind of similar to Joe in that he's not a very good fantasy producer, but he's so cheap that he could still give you a decent score. If Danny Green's out, that opens up a lot of minutes for Thibault, I think. Yeah. If everybody is in, it's a situation where Thibault could easily play the 18 minutes that he played last game. He could play 24 and Joe plays 18, but really I think the answer is Danny Green being out.
I think that we have exhausted everything that we need to talk about for Philly, but they are one of the more complicated things that we have right now.
I mean, they could potentially end up with like 8 guys, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if Embiid, Maxie, and Danny Green sit, obviously everything that we've already said becomes meaningless, but you're jamming a lot of Philly after that.
Wait, is this game like at risk of getting canceled?
I think everything's at risk of getting canceled.
Well, but I mean, if all of those guys sit, they have like 6 guys, right?
Well, technically they have 8. So it'd be Curry, Tobias Harris, Thibault. That's 3. Paul Reed is 4. Isaiah Joe is 5. Bassey 6. Miles Powell 7. Aaron Henry 8. And then they signed Tyler Johnson wherever the hell he is in the world right now. I don't know, but they did sign him.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about the Johnson signing. And then for some reason I was thinking Aaron Henry was out. I think I had him mixed up with Jaden Springer in my head.
Yeah. You don't know the difference between Jaden Springer and Aaron Henry, man. Come on. What kind of analyst are you? Good God.
So yeah. All right. So to answer the game, I mean, it's not at risk as far as like you said, they're all at risk, but no, I was thinking that they were like short if they sat these guys.
No, but they are a very interesting DFS play. If those 3 guys happen to be out, or even 2 of 3, you're freeing up 60 something minutes. Yeah.
It'll be the really fun game. It's the best part of DFS when you are like, okay, well, this team's going to get absolutely annihilated and probably score like 85 points, but all 85 points are going to go to like these 6 guys.
Yeah. Well, enjoy that, everybody. We'll switch it over to the Boston side where it's not really a ton better. For Boston, we have, I want to make sure I get it right here, questionable tags on Jason Tatum, Dennis Schroeder, and Romeo Langford. Al Horford out, Josh Richardson out, Grant Williams out, Hernan Gomez out, Parker out, Broderick Thomas out, Sam Hauser out. I'm going to go with the assumption that everybody that could be in is in for right now. Who stands out most to you from the Boston Celtics if the Q tags are in?
If the Q tags are in, I think Robert Williams stands out. Mentioned him in both my DraftKings and FanDuel tournament videos. Just going a little bit under-owned here. I think it's a risky matchup, especially if Embiid's in. Clearly, you can see how Williams could get in foul trouble. But in the 6 games he's played without Horford this season, he's averaged about 33.5 minutes per game. In the last 2 games, he played 29 against the Knicks. Prior to that, he had played 36 or 37 against the Warriors. He's averaged about 1.02 DraftKings points per minute, 1.09 FanDuel points per minute. And on FanDuel, he has power forward eligibility. So getting to Williams at relatively low ownership would look pretty appealing. Smart would look pretty good. Schroeder would look pretty good if he's in. If everybody's in on DraftKings, Tatum looks pretty difficult at 10.5. Brown would still be pretty tough to get to, I think, at 9K. Ennis Freedom would look fine at 3,600, probably playing most of the backup center minutes behind Williams, especially if Embiid is in. If Embiid is out, I still think Freedom plays a lot of backup minutes, but it does increase the likelihood that this game just turns into 5 wings running up and down the floor against each other.
Absolutely. So I don't really have a lean on any of the questionable pieces here. Like Tatum being out would be a really weird trickle down effect because they don't have like type players for Jason Tatum. If, Schroeder or Langford end up out, I don't think that's probably going to be all that important. They've got enough of those sort of like rando guys that they can keep jamming those guys in.
Yeah, they have plenty of They have plenty of 0.65 to 0.7 fantasy point per minute wings that they can just rotate through.
Yeah, absolutely. What happens if Tatum is out? Do we even have a hypothetical here?
So if it's just Tatum out, I would guess that they go like Smart, Schroeder, Brown, Langford, center.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Justin Jackson would not surprise me at all if he ended up starting in this scenario, just because he's like the only other guy that isn't 6'2".
CJ Miles too.
Is he with the team yet?
Yeah, he's available.
Okay. Well, we also got CJ Miles. I wanted him to go back to Toronto so he could be CJ kilometers, but whatever.
And don't forget, Langford, same wingspan as Jason Tatum.
Yes, we learned that information Friday of last week.
Yeah.
Did not see that one coming at all. I don't have anything else really that we could add here for Boston. This one's a little bit trickier just because the Tatum piece is a bigger swing piece. It's not as obvious of what is going to happen as it is on Philly.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't even done my projections for this game yet. I just skipped over it and went to the next ones because it was just like there's so many moving pieces here that I have no idea right now.
All righty. Working my way back. Super chat from Alan Alexander said, "Hey, Josh and Adam, thanks for all the content. Merry Christmas. A safe holiday season to you and yours." Right back at you, man. Appreciate having you here. Thank you so much for the super chat. It means a lot. And yeah, to everybody, happy holidays. Whatever I have to say that makes it the PC way to say that right now is what I'm saying to you. If I got it wrong, my apologies. I meant nothing by it.
I hope you get canceled mid-show.
You and me both. I want to go downstairs and eat dinner. Oh, man. Look, of all the things that I've said on this show, the wrong happy holidays is not going to be in the top 5. That much I know. Got a little wild there during quarantine. Too many cocktails while we were doing shows and doing NBA 2K sims. Schedule for the rest of the day. NBA Live Before Lock coming up at 6:30. So immediately after this on this same stream. And at 7:15, for some reason, I'm adding it into my own run sheet. I forgot to put it in there before, but NFL Live Before Lock round 2 coming up 7:15. That will be starting during the NBA Live Before Lock show, but you'll be able to watch them both if you really want to. NBA player rankings are free today. NHL player rankings are free, and NFL top plays. So if you're looking to play showdown for tonight or single game contests on FanDuel, you can use our NFL top plays tool. The chat's canceling me a little bit here. Rob says I'm getting coal. Coal? I don't even think I've ever seen a piece of coal. Chappelle, that's best I can do. Houston Rockets, 8.5-point dogs in Chicago, 223 total here. Rockets, not very good. No different news, though. Still a Q tag on Armani Brooks. No Kevin Porter, no Jalen Green. Christian Wood on FanDuel is projected for 19% ownership. Jason Tate is projected for 15% ownership on FanDuel. No one is in double digits on DraftKings. Adam, are you getting to Houston on DK, assuming Armani Brooks is in?
I don't see a ton, but they're also not pulling much ownership. They seem like they're kind of correctly owned. Jason Tate, Christian Wood, Garrison Matthews, all at the top of the list on DraftKings in terms of optimal percentage, all basically neutral leverage to slightly on their own, but nothing that really stands out as a priority. The one thing I am interested in is who starts if Armani Brooks is in, because we know Josh Christopher replaced DJ Augustine in the starting lineup in their last game. I don't know if he would hold that spot or if it goes back to Armani Brooks. If it is Christopher at 3,900, I think it would be likely that he plays 26 or 27 minutes, which would make him look like a decent value.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with the Brooks/Christopher minutes, but Christopher will certainly look pretty good if he has the ability to get a couple extras, because shooting guard, small forward, 3,900 on DraftKings is a dream setup in this spot. FanDuel, I agree with the ownership on Christian Wood. I actually think it's honestly a little bit low. 8,200 power forward and center eligible. That sounds great to me. 15% for Jason Tate at 6,100. I mean, I don't think it's crazy, but to me, it feels a little high. No one pulling any real ownership otherwise. Do you have any interest in Eric Gordon?
Not really. I mean, I don't think he's bad. Like he can certainly succeed at 5,700. If you're someone watching the show and you're like playing a couple of lineups and you're like, Eric Gordon fits, I want to play Eric Gordon, I think that's fine. So like, I guess I would say I have interest in that sense. Like, yeah. He's fine. He's probably going to play 30 to 32 minutes. He's going to get some shots up with Kevin Porter Jr. out. But in the context of all of the other options I could go to, Gordon's not particularly high on the list.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I thought he stood out as like a unowned GPP play on a six-gamer that does shoot when he's out there. And that's
exactly. It's his projection doesn't look very appealing to me. But he does, I think, have enough volatility given the fact that he can get some shots up that he looks a little bit better.
Okay. What do we do with the rest of these guys? Are you getting to any Garrison Matthews, Şengün, Martin? What else is here for Houston today?
I really don't see a lot here. Like all that I really see from this team is like low owned contrarian prayer type guys. Garrison Matthews probably plays a bunch of minutes. He's 4,800. He's not a great fantasy producer, but probably plays a bunch of minutes. Gordon, if he gets hot, he'll shoot some more and look decent. It's just, Şengün probably plays like 20 minutes or so, makes him look not great at $5,900 and only a center on DraftKings. It's just a team. There's a couple teams on this slate that are close to not fully healthy necessarily in this case, but as healthy as they have been in the last couple of weeks. And so the pricing is just really tough to get to. And then you factor in that Houston just sucks in general.
Imi Udoka says that Romeo Langford feels better from his neck soreness. Dennis Schroeder will test his wind out pregame after being sick. Jason Tatum tweaked his ankle on a fan on the sidelines during the Knicks game and will test it out pregame. So all three guys are still up in the air. If Dennis Schroeder goes out there to warm up and says, no, I can't get through warmups, that seems like it would be really weird to me. Like, I feel like that before you go out to do it. So
yeah, all that I'm really getting out of that is that whenever they say a player is going to test something, I assume they're going to play, because it's like they're saying, hey, one last time, go see how you feel. And assuming the player doesn't say, hey, I can't play, like, I assume they're good to go.
Yeah, to me, Langford is the guy most likely to not play, because neck soreness is different than sprained ankle, and I'm just tired. So
right. And like Jason Tatum, so he sprained his ankle on a fan in the game where he played the entire final fourth quarter and got to 36.5 minutes. Seems like he might be okay.
Anything else here for Houston?
No.
On to Chicago, where there's certainly a lot to talk about. Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, Alex Caruso, and Javonte Green, all somewhere from 20 to 35% owned on both sites. You can pick and choose sort of which guy is most owned or least owned across them all. Kobe White, not pulling any ownership on FanDuel, is pulling 13% on DraftKings, where he's 3,700 point guard, shooting guard eligible. We're just getting to a lot of Chicago here. This is one of the better spots, unless I'm crazy.
Yeah, completely agree. The Bulls are pretty shorthanded, but they're shorthanded with most of their normal players still in, missing Levine. So it looks really good for Vooch, DeRozan, Caruso, Ball, Green, assuming they're the starting five. Most of Levine's usage should go to Vooch and DeRozan. Lonzo's just not really the type of guy that's likely to go out there and get up a bunch of shots unless he's knocking everything down. Caruso's not a high usage guy. Javonte Green's virtually a no usage guy, but the minutes should be there for that entire group. Vooch, DeRozan, Caruso likely to play 34 to 36 minutes. Green is as well. Lonzo probably leads the way. He played 38 minutes yesterday. I think it's pretty fair to expect that again. This is a game where he's likely to, it just like suits his playing style as well. He can get out, do a lot of stuff in transition against the Rockets. And then off the bench, there's riskier, but still, I think, decent options at lower ownership in Kobe White and Alfonso McKinney. White hasn't really done a whole lot this year. Even in the last game where they were shorthanded, he only had like 10 fantasy points. He has like a 20% usage rate. If you go back to last year without Levine on the floor, he's at 23.5%. He did get his rotation last game, had him out there for most of the time that DeMar DeRozan wasn't on the floor. So I do think that White, at the very least, gives you upside in the sense that he will go out there and chuck up some shots if it's falling. So still a pretty low floor on him, but I think he's got a pretty high ceiling. And then McKinney is someone that can play multiple positions. Derek Jones is out. McKinney played about 18 minutes last game. I think it's likely he picks up a few more here. And then kind of like you and I were talking about this morning, if anything goes wrong with any of the starters, if any of them get in foul trouble, roll an ankle, whatever, McKinney is probably first or second, depending on who it is, in line to pick up more minutes. So he's someone where he shouldn't get a lot of ownership, but it also isn't going to take much for him to end up looking like a good value.
Are you worried about any rules for Chicago?
I don't want more. I definitely don't want more than two of Green, White, and McKinney. I probably don't want more than one.
Okay. When it comes to Ball, DeRozan, Vooch, and Caruso, those guys they can be in anything with anybody. Those guys are closing no matter what, barring injury. Yeah,
the only concern you have there is like if you have Vooch and DeRozan and Lonzo, how exactly are they all paying off their salaries without the Rockets just getting run out of the gym?
Yeah, absolutely. And you could get that construction. It's not going to be too crazy, even if you're playing 150 lineups. That particular trio probably not coming up all that frequently too.
Right, exactly. And if you are concerned about it, that's a situation where rather than say, I don't want 3 guys from Chicago, I'd be more inclined to say, like, if I have 3 guys from Chicago, then make those my Eric Gordon lineups or my, Christian Wood lineups, whatever.
Yeah. Alrighty. I don't really have much else for Chicago. Like, to me, this one's just super obvious, and there's not a lot that we can really talk about otherwise.
Yeah, pretty much.
Alrighty. On to Oklahoma City. 8.5-point dogs in Memphis for the Thunder right now. Everybody's available. They're like the bizarro team of this league. They're awful every other day. But today, for some reason, when every other team has 27 guys on a COVID list, Oklahoma City is fully healthy. Josh Giddey continues to pull a ton of ownership on FanDuel, 24% right now. I get it. Shea is the only other guy over 10% across both sites. It's basically like, 10 to 14 as of right now. What are you seeing here for Oklahoma City? Because they look entirely uninteresting.
On DraftKings, I think they're the least appealing team, even more so than Houston. They're relatively expensive. They are essentially healthy. Gilgeous-Alexander, Giddey, Dort, we know these guys have ceilings in tournaments, but they're more expensive than like so many other guys that you can get to that look good. It's not like it's just, there's one better play at their salary or their position and they are the next best, contrarian piece. There's like multiple plays that look better. So I don't really I have a pretty hard time getting to anything here. Like Bassey is cheap, but he's coming off the bench now. He's likely to give you 24 to 26 minutes. That's not super appealing. Robinson Earl probably is playing 20 or 21 minutes. He's 3,300. So if this happens to randomly be a game he plays more, then he looks okay. But there's nothing that suggests that's going to happen as long as you're getting the Robinson Earl /Favors /Muscala rotation. So just really nothing.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Giddey's price on FanDuel makes sense, and that's why he's getting ownership. If you want shares of Dort or SGA, like I understand why that happens. None of this is a priority.
Yeah, Giddey on FanDuel was one of my top 5 tournament plays earlier in my video. But
I was gonna say, where can you find that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Somewhere on our site, I think.
Just go with our YouTube channel. That's that answer works. Yeah, I don't mean like give people the URL, man.
Anyway, but yeah, Giddey on FanDuel looks pretty good. On DraftKings, though, I just can't get there.
All righty. This one should get fun. Memphis, slightly different than they were this morning. Wait, hold on. Yes, slightly different than they were this morning. Ja Morant now questionable, as is Tyus Jones. Brandon Clark out, Zaire Williams out, Aldama out, Merrill out. Late add to the injury report, Q-Tag. I think we're getting Ja Morant today.
This is such a weird game for Ja Morant to come back.
It's so dumb. Why? Of all the games, unless you're just fine, I guess. Like, you got to come back sometime.
Yeah. So
I have him in, and I'm not playing him.
I don't have him in right now, but that is obviously huge news.
And then, if like we've got Ja Morant and Tyus Jones play. One of each of those guys don't play. Both guys don't play. Like that seemed like they're both questionable. That's all on the table. Obviously, if Ja is back, you don't play a single share of Tyus Jones any longer. That becomes an impossibility.
Right. If Morant's back, Jones is off the board. Jackson, Brooks, Bane look worse, but still playable. Melton is pretty much off the board. Morant himself, I don't know how many minutes he plays. He'd be worth like a tournament flyer if they don't specify that, he's limited to 30 minutes or anything, but I assume he would not be playing 36 minutes out of the gate. But yeah, so you would just take usage away from Jackson, Brooks, Bane. They still look fine because they're pretty cheap. Like right now, I think are some of the more underpriced mid-range guys. So if Morant's back, they still look reasonable, but it would make all of them look a little bit worse.
Who's your favorite play on this Memphis team? Let's assume Ja Morant is in. Is that Brooks?
It's either Brooks or Steven Adams.
Okay.
I really like Steven Adams.
Okay. Well, talk to me about it. 5,500 on FanDuel, 5K on DraftKings, pulling a little bit of ownership on DK.
He's just been playing a lot more minutes recently. Brandon Clark is out again, but he played 36 minutes yesterday, but in competitive games lately, he's just been playing a lot and trying to pull it up now. Cause I know over his last 5 games, he's averaged about 28 minutes, but you have 20 minutes in a blowout against Philly. You have 21 minutes in a game against the Rockets where I don't know what happened, but he only played 21 minutes. But in his last 3, he's played 30, 31, and 36 against Portland, Sacramento, and the Blazers. He's not a bad per minute guy. This is a front court where I think he's going to have no trouble grabbing rebounds. Even if he plays 27, 28 minutes here, I think he looks really good at 5K and not a ton of ownership.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't have anything else to add there. Is there anything else that we should specifically touch on? I don't really have like a hot take on Jaron Jackson right now. Morant in, Morant out. He still just is a good GPP play, or a solid GPP play at least.
Yeah, the only, I guess, one positive for Jackson is, I mean, he can foul. He'll foul literally anybody, but OKC is a little bit less of a threat in that regard. You know, it's like Wiggins and Dort and Robinson Earl and Favors. I think he hopefully should be okay.
You would think.
Like, he'll probably hack SGA on his first 2 drives, and that'll be it. But
yeah, Oklahoma City. If we want to actually put data to this, Oklahoma City 27th in the league in free throw rate. So not exactly a team that's getting fouled all that frequently. I got nothing else here for Memphis. Do you?
Nope.
Keep your eyes on the news, everybody. That will be important. And if for some strange reason we get Ja out, Tyus Jones out, which I do not expect, I think that's the lowest probability outcome here. Fire up your DeAnthony Meltons for sure. And a lot of guys.
I thought about that. That would be fun.
It's fun for you always, no matter who's in. You probably fire up DeAnthony Melton, whether or not those guys are in or out. With Morant out and Jones in, which is what I have projected right now. Melton is in. He's definitely in like get him in some tournament lineups territory for me. Over the past 30 days, everybody that I projected in for Memphis is no lower than 0.85 fantasy points. They have 7 guys on FanDuel north of a fantasy point per minute. You don't really see that all that often.
No, and it makes sense. Like looking at my DraftKings stuff with Morant out and Jones in, Jackson, Brooks, Jones, Adams, Bain, Anderson, Melton, all are in like playable territory.
Yeah. And like Tillman just doesn't play enough, but he's been at 1.1. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. Alrighty, folks, moving it on to our sponsor, Yahoo Sports. And you can get all sorts of stuff from this deal right now. We'll start with this. You can get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum from this deal. Click the link in the description to help you out, or follow the link. You're going to have to type it in yourself. It's in the banner above our heads right now. You could email support@awesemo.com and we can help get you set up for immediate access. You can also receive a $100 first match deposit bonus with Yahoo. It's part of their 12 days of winning when you use the promo code XMAS100. That is the letter X, MAS 100, one word, for up to $100 on that first deposit. You could use that bonus to enter tonight's 100K Monday Night Football Baller. And you can use our DFS tools and projections that are all designed specifically for Yahoo to give yourself your best shot at winning. Also, what up, Sixers? Tyrese Maxey ruled out. So, by the way, click that link. Go sign up at Yahoo. Let's work our way back here. Tyrese Maxey ruled out. What's the trickle-down effect?
Isaiah Joe plays a lot, I think.
Yeah.
So
the point guard of this team is now
Seth.
Yeah.
Like if so now if we assume still that Green and Embiid are in, I assume the starting lineup is Curry, Joe. It's either Curry, Joe, or Curry, Thibault, Green, Harris, Embiid.
Okay, there we go.
But looking at the rotations last game, where again Maxie was out, but you had Milton, Joe was subbing in for Milton. He played almost every minute that Shake Milton was not on the floor.
Interesting. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. That's one big domino down. We'll see what else comes out here from the rest of Philly. We're going to move it on to Charlotte Hornets, 12-point dogs in Utah, 235 total. On the Charlotte side, we got a little bit of news throughout the day. Wasn't anything that I was expecting either, but doubtful tag on Gordon Hayward, lower back discomfort. We already know that we're going to be without Cody Martin. So what is the biggest benefit? Because we weren't all that high on Charlotte prior to this. Their prices are still up from everybody being out. They were, generally speaking, unappealing. Who benefits most now for Gordon Hayward being out?
I mean, most probably Oubre, because he could, I'm assuming is going to go from playing off the bench for like 28 minutes to probably starting and playing like 36.
Okay. I had a different answer.
What was my second answer would be PJ Washington.
0 for 2. Jalen McDaniels?
I mean, okay, yeah, probably plays mid-20s in minutes, but I still have him at like 19 to 20 DraftKings points.
I have at 21-7 right now.
How many minutes?
4% ownership too.
How many minutes?
26.
Okay, I went 26 also.
Okay.
So I think the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway is that, so I don't think Hayward being out has any massive impact in terms of production. He hasn't been a super high usage guy or anything this year. He's at 21.6%. Oubre balances that out. He's at 22.6%. So I don't think that, you're looking and saying, Bridges or Ball or anybody shoots a bunch more or anything like that. But I think that one thing we've seen from Borrego this year is that when he runs a tight rotation. So I think there's a good chance that, we had talked about this morning that you weren't even getting 48 minutes at center recently from Mason Plumlee and PJ Washington. I think it's likely you get 48 minutes now. I think you maybe even get a few minutes of them alongside each other. Like maybe Washington can get to like Plumlee plays 22, Washington plays 30, like something like that.
Okay.
So that makes PJ Washington kind of interesting at 5,500 on DraftKings. Still not confident. The matchup sucks. That's the one thing that you kind of have to keep in mind here. They're still playing at Utah. It's still a really, really tough spot. But I think it's likely that you get a few more minutes for Rozier. I think that Bridges, probably plays 38 minutes or so. I think that Oubre plays around 36. So it takes it from guys that I thought were sort of like third or fourth options in tournaments to maybe moves them to like second or third options where they're still not going to be popular, but that is 34 minutes or so out of the rotation. And from what we've seen from Borrego, I think it's likely that a lot of those minutes are redistributed to guys that were already playing.
Yeah, I mean, with the amount of guys that they just now have in their G League team, I think, and I don't think they're going to Nick Richards. They're just going to other people that have just been it's fully redistributed.
Yeah, the only I threw like 9 minutes to James Bouknight, and other than that, I'm just expecting, Ball and Smith at splitting 48 point guard minutes, and then Bridges, Rozier, Oubre playing a lot. Washington, Plumlee, I already said probably like 30, 20. 22, and then kind of just threw the rest to Bouknight. But even that, it wouldn't be surprising based on what we've seen. If I have Rozier at 34 minutes, if he played 37, I wouldn't be shocked. If I have Bridges at 38, if he played 41, I wouldn't be shocked. So it's kind of just, I don't want to project them that high, but based on what we've seen Charlotte do, it wouldn't be that surprising.
And your assumption is Oubre to the starting lineup here?
Oubre or McDaniels. My guess is Oubre, but I could also see if they wanted to keep Oubre scoring off the bench.
Yeah, I think we can go either direction there, and it wouldn't be all that surprising. And I don't think it really impacts Kelly Oubre's minutes all that much.
Yeah, if Oubre is coming off the bench, I probably go from 36 minutes to 34 and then 26 to 28 for McDaniels or something.
All right, we're on the same page there. Anything else you want to touch on from Charlotte?
No, they're still they're a risky team, but they do have a 113 total here. They are reasonably priced and they're not getting much ownership. They are just, I think, a team where I'll just be using these pieces as, okay, I have a bunch of good plays in this lineup. Here's Miles Bridges. Here's Terry Rozier. Here's LaMelo, whatever.
I think they're in a really good spot where you want 1.5 Hornets guys in most of your GPP lineups, because if this game stays competitive, we're talking about a 235 total. There's going to be a lot of fantasy scoring here if Charlotte is in it.
Yeah, and it's also nice because there's a lot of pieces to be interested in on the Utah side. So it's kind of nice that Hayward's out because it at least gives you, not that you need run backs in NBA or anything, but it at least gives you a little bit more appealing plays from Charlotte. Because I hate when Charlotte doesn't look appealing because their opponent always looks appealing. And so it turns into okay, well, I want to play 6 different guys against Charlotte and nobody from Charlotte.
Jason Tatum available, Romeo Langford available.
All right, cool. So next step is make sure Tatum is starting. But
yep. This doesn't feel like one where he's available but not playing.
No, I don't think that's going to be the case.
That's also a true thing for every single time you see available. Yeah, we're on the same page. All right, let's go to the Utah side. And for Utah, it's just sort of business as usual. Mia One is questionable for those of you that care. That should be precise. That should be precisely 0 of you. So Donovan Mitchell, 24% projected ownership on FanDuel, is the leader in the clubhouse here, but Gobert is 15 to 20 across both sites. Bojan Bogdanovic is 15 to 20 across both sites. Mike Conley is 10 to 15. We're getting Clarkson around 10, Royce O'Neal around 10, Rudy Gay around 10. There is a ton to like here from Utah. This is as good of a matchup as you're going to find in DFS.
I wouldn't be surprised if in 150 lineups I have exposure to 9 different guys from this team.
Yep, I'm with you.
Not not saying that I recommend playing 9 guys, that there's 9 guys that are like actual like good plays, but the salaries here are pretty reasonable on the worst options, and then the best options, like Mitchell's pretty expensive, but you can still justify 9,700 from him. He's really good. He's in a great spot. So he still looks fine. Gobert should absolutely destroy the Charlotte front court. He played like 37 minutes last game. I have him in for like 32 or 33 right now. That's what he's typically playing, but obviously could play more. Conley is back. He's 6K, so he looks pretty good. Bogdanovich at 5K looks fine. Clarkson typically gets more minutes when he's playing well. Playing against the Hornets is likely to make Jordan Clarkson play well, so there's a pretty good chance he gets a couple of extra minutes here. Gay, I assume, just backs up O'Neal, but even 18 to 20 minutes of him at 3,600 is reasonable. Whiteside, if you get 32 minutes for Gobert, you're getting 16 for Whiteside. He can double in that time against Charlotte. Ingles sucks, but probably plays 26 minutes or so. I think the priorities are Mitchell, Gobert, but then mixing in the rest of these guys is certainly something I want to be doing.
Yeah, I find this entire game pretty fascinating. The problem lies in the fact that we basically have, I don't know, 7, 9, like 16 legitimate options across both teams, which is rarely fun, but it's like the sneaky best shot in a GPP if Charlotte happens to be slightly better than a 12-point dog.
Right. Yeah, and there's not a ton of ownership coming. I mean, on DraftKings, the highest owned guy on Utah is Gobert at 18% right now.
Right.
On Charlotte, it's LaMelo at 16% at 9,600.
Yeah.
Other than that, nobody's above 10. So, yeah, it's a game that I think I'll be getting to a lot in tournaments because there's a lot of good options, but the pricing is like close enough to right that combined with the blowout risk, you're just not going to see as much ownership as you normally would on a 235 total.
All right. This is a tweet from Keith Pompey. He's the Sixers beat writer. This is all it says. The Sixers will play guard Miles Powell tonight.
Good.
I don't totally know how to read into that one, but apparently Miles Powell will play tonight.
Not in the player pool on DraftKings. I don't know about FanDuel.
Let's find out if he's in my database first before it even matters. Nope, not even in my database. So you'll cross that bridge later, but probably doesn't matter. Actually, I guess I could search it on FanDuel. Doesn't hurt to know. Nope, he is not. So don't try to play him because you'll fail. Seth Curry will start the game at point guard for the Sixers with Tyrese Maxey and Shake Milton out.
Did we get the rest of it?
No. That is all it was. So if I get the rest of it, I will be sure to shout that stuff out. All righty. Here we go again. On to the Sacramento Kings. No. De'Aaron Fox, Terrence Davis, Davion Mitchell, Marvin Bagley, Alex Len, or Lewis King. Questionable tag still on Rashawn Holmes. I mean, we got to start there. Do you think he's playing?
No, but I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like he's just been out long enough that I assume he's not until I hear that he is. I'm
with you. Assuming he is, well, we are, I guess, assuming that he is in for right now. Tyrese Halliburton, 25 to 30% owned across FanDuel and DraftKings. Buddy Hield, 47% owned on FanDuel, 31 on DraftKings. Harrison Barnes, 25 to 30% owned across both sites. Chimezie Metu on DraftKings, where he's a power forward in 4,700, 33% owned. A little bit less so on FanDuel, where he's a 6K center, just 9%. After that, no one's pulling any ownership. If Holmes is out, Tristan Thompson's going to get a little bit, 5,100 power forward, center eligible on FanDuel, just center eligible on DraftKings. Let's start with the four main plays: Halliburton, Hield, Barnes, Metu. Talk me through your thought process here.
I think this is one of the most difficult situations to project that we've had in a while. If this game is competitive and Sacramento's like a 13-point dog at Golden State, you're likely to get a ton of minutes from Halliburton, Barnes, Hield, and then, Metu probably plays a lot. You probably get 48 minutes split between Thompson and Damian Jones, more or less. But Halliburton, Barnes, Hield, I think if this game's competitive, give you 38 plus minutes across the board, most likely. That would make them all look really good. I think the ownership makes sense in that these guys could easily be the best plays on the slate. My concerns are that even if, so let's say this game's like competitive, but you lose like 3 minutes at the end of the game. And so these guys end up playing 35, 36 minutes. I don't think Barnes and Hield look that good. I think they look like good plays, but I don't think that I have a hard time justifying the ownership coming into them if they play 36 minutes. Barnes, like going back, pretty much any set of data I could find going back to last year, whether it's time with De'Aaron Fox off the floor, time with Fox and Mitchell off the floor, time with Fox, Mitchell, DeLon Wright, and Corey Joseph off the floor. Like, I just can't find Harrison Barnes getting a huge uptick in usage. Buddy Hield gets an uptick in usage, but it's not as high as you would think. If you average out like this season and last season, you get like 21.5 to 22% without those guys on the floor. His rebounding numbers aren't anything special. His assist numbers aren't anything special. Even looking at the 2 games that they've played recently with Fox and Mitchell out, Barnes has had a 22.8 and 14.9% usage rate, according to Fantasy Cruncher. Hield has had a 14.8 and 21.7% usage rate, according to Fantasy Cruncher. The ceiling is massive for those guys just because the minutes, potentially could be huge. They could both play 40 minutes potentially. It's a fast-paced game, and if Hield's shooting well, maybe he shoots more. But I just have a hard time really thinking that they are worth their ownership. I feel differently about Halliburton. The reason is that he is absolutely dominating assist opportunities with these guys out. He has a 47.5% assist percentage without Fox and Mitchell on the floor this year. That's ridiculously high. So I went back and looked to see what had happened to his potential assists in the couple of games he's played without Fox and Mitchell. For the season, Halliburton does lead the team in potential assists, but he's averaged about 12 potential assists per 36 minutes for the season. In the 2 games he's played without Fox and Mitchell, he's averaging 20.5 potential assists per 36 minutes. So he is just doing everything. The usage rate is up a few points as well. Halliburton, I think, looks great. Like, if I give Halliburton 36 minutes, he still looks like a very good play at 7K. Barnes and Hield, for me, just look like good, but not really special plays. So I think that given their ownership, I'm just likely not to get a ton of them. If they burn me, they burn me. But Halliburton, I'm pretty comfortable going to. The other 2, I'm a little bit more concerned about.
Who do you have with the highest usage projection for the Kings?
Buddy Hield.
How high?
21.5.
Okay. I got him at 25. I think that's where we're differing here. And not that I'm disagreeing with anything that you just went through. I have a hard time thinking that some individual player doesn't go, like, for it to be 21.5. We're basically saying that like everybody on this team is in this narrow band of like everybody just shoots the same amount. And right. I think Hield is the most likely to take that jump in usage in any given game. I also think it's interesting that if Halliburton's assist rate is as high as it is, I feel like Buddy Hield kick out threes are a big piece of that. I could just be creating my own narrative here. So I went to 25% on Hield from a usage perspective. He is popping pretty aggressively for me from FanDuel and DraftKings.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like, I think you're right. Like, Hield's projected usage should be higher, but I also probably projected his assist percentage higher than I should have. Like, I kind of like balanced those out because typically those 2 numbers, in most cases, especially for somebody like Hield, if one goes up, the other one goes down. And so, like, if you look at his numbers this year, his usage rate is higher, but his assist percentage is like non-existent no matter who's on the floor. If you go back to last year, his usage rate's lower, but he actually gets some assists. So I think, I could just, and I probably will, going, as between now and lock, just to kind of get a little bit higher projection on Hield, but probably will add to the usage a little bit at the expense of the assists, especially because of how Halliburton has been dominating them. But I think that's kind of the thing, is like, it's a sliding scale for those. And kind of depending on what set of data you look at, you get either more assists and less shooting, or more shooting, less assists.
All righty. So that works our way through those first 4 guys. What are we doing with Tristan Thompson if Richaun Holmes is out? How good of a play is he at 43? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I like Thompson at 4,300. Last game, you basically got 28 minutes for Thompson. You got about 20 for Damian Jones. That doesn't have to be the case here. Like you could get 26 for Thompson, 18 for Jones, throw a few to Keta, and basically get a three-man rotation where Keta's not playing a ton, or what they did 2 games ago. Thompson basically got 28 minutes, and then you split the rest between Keta and Damian Jones. But even if you give Thompson 26 minutes, he's going to look pretty good. If you give Damian Jones 18 to 20, he looks pretty good. The risk there, of course, would be if he's not playing really well like he did last game, then you could get Keta in the rotation. But if Holmes is out, I'm expecting it to mostly be Thompson and Jones.
Is there anything else for you here in Sacramento?
Chimezi Metu. I don't think we specifically mentioned him, but he played 32 minutes last game. He did not close. That was a pretty competitive game, so kind of interesting he wasn't in the closing lineup. But I think it's likely that you're getting at least 32 minutes, if not more here. He's a good fantasy producer. He's 4,700, so he looks good. Again, he's getting a lot of ownership. He's at 32%. Yesterday, he got like 60% ownership on DraftKings, which I thought was a bit insane. But yeah, I mean, he just looks like a good value at 4,700.
No Woodard, Robinson, Ramsey, Mo Harkless, perhaps?
If I was going somewhere else, it would be Harkless at 3K.
Okay.
I don't think I'm going to get there, though.
All right. Anything else for Sacramento?
Nope.
On to the Golden State Warriors. We have no Andrew Wiggins. We know that we have no Jordan Poole, obviously no Wiseman, no Klay Thompson. Everybody else is available in this spot. Steph Curry on FanDuel currently projected for 43% ownership, 23 on DraftKings, where he's 11,800. The second highest owned guy in this game, Otto Porter, about 20% across both sites. Draymond Green not too far behind Porter. Let's start with Steph. How are you feeling about $11,800 Steph Curry today?
Feel pretty good about it. No Poole, no Wiggins. Poole being out, we know elevates his usage rate quite a bit. This is a game where there's blowout risk, and it could come in the form of, Golden State just locking down Sacramento or just a really good team effort. But there's a pretty good chance if this game is a blowout to the extent where Curry's not playing the fourth quarter, that Curry just absolutely annihilated them for 3 quarters and looks good. And then also with the amount of value on the slate, to some extent, it's the raw points that matter too. If Curry just goes for 50 fantasy points, that's probably not going to get it done. But if he gets 58, 60, even if that's not great for 11-8, it's probably still pretty useful as far as winning a tournament.
How do we manage Otto Porter being in 20% of lineups?
I'm still pretty interested to see what the starting lineup looks like here. We talked about it this morning. My guess is Damien Lee and Otto Porter filling in for Poole and Wiggins, but it's Steve Kerr. I have no idea. I didn't think Moody was going to start 2 games ago. So I don't know. You could get so many different guys in here, but assuming it's those two, I'd feel pretty good about Porter. I think that if he starts, it's a signal that he's likely to play at least mid-20s in minutes, if not more. He's not a bad fantasy producer. This is a really, really good spot. Damian Lee at 3,800, not as good a fantasy producer as Porter, but again, if he starts, it's likely he's playing upper 20s in minutes. It would make him look like a good value. The rest of these guys, Iggy at 3,200, you can mix him into some lineups. Bielitsa, Peyton, they're not likely to play a lot of minutes, but if they do, they both produce at a high rate. So they could just be, 1% owned tournament winners, basically. And then Kevon Looney, I'm actually interested in. He's 3,900 at center, so it's not easy to get to him. But we have seen some games recently where he's played more. Even in their last game, he didn't play at all in the fourth quarter, but he still got 21 minutes through 3 quarters. With Golden State being shorthanded and going up against a Kings team that I assume is giving close to 48 minutes to Thompson and Damian Jones, I think that you could see Looney get 24 minutes or so.
Ja Morant trending in the right direction to play today per Taylor Jenkins.
All right. So Memphis just kind of gets a slight downgrade in most spots and then a huge downgrade for Tyus Jones.
Who are you willing to take shots on for Golden State here, given the fact that they're probably going to play 12 dudes?
So the starters, assuming the starters are guys, even if it's not Porter and Lee, if it's Bielitsa or Toscano Anderson or Iggy, guys that we could.
What if it's Moody?
No.
Okay.
I was gonna say guys that we could reasonably expect to play 24 plus minutes if they're starting. If it's Moody, I think it's just a placeholder type. Here's 12 minutes. You're gonna play 6 to open each half type of thing. But yeah, any of whoever's starting out of, Porter, Lee, Peyton, Bielitsa, Iggy, Toscano Anderson, any of those guys, I'd be more than happy to play. Assuming they're coming off the bench, I think taking shots at like Iggy is fine because he could easily play 24 off the bench. Bjelica because he's likely to play like 14 to 16. But if you're wrong and he just plays like 20 or 22, he probably destroys that price. Peyton's kind of the same thing. I think the path is a little bit more difficult for him. But yeah, like as far as guys off the bench go, it's the ones that produce at a good level, which would be like Bjelica and Peyton, and then Iggy, who I think probably leads playing time for guys off the bench.
You get into any of the bucket?
Not unless he starts.
Okay. Got about 5 minutes to go here before we round this out. 2,100 people in here, just 374 likes. Now is the time. The gift of giving. Hit that like button if you can. It's the holiday season. Help us out a bit. Let's run that number well north of 500 if we can do it. As Adam and I close this one out. San Antonio, 5-point dogs in Los Angeles against the Clippers. For San Antonio, still waiting on their only piece of news. Oh, no, we're not waiting on it. Doug McDermott's probable. We're waiting on no news whatsoever from San Antonio. DeJounte Murray projected for 24% ownership on FanDuel. The next highest guy on FanDuel is 3.8% owned Jakob Poeltl. I basically agree with all of that. DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Kelvin Johnson, and Jakob Poeltl are all about 12% owned on DraftKings. I think most of that is pretty reasonable. How are you managing the San Antonio team on DK today?
Not a ton that stands out here. I don't think Poeltl, Murray, Johnson, White all look fine.
Dennis
Murray
Schroeder in, by the way. So all of those Celtics guys are in.
Murray and Mitchell, I think, are pretty comparable at 9,800 and 9,700. Definitely a spot where I would pay attention to ownership. Right now, it looks like we have Murray rather at like 13%, and we have Mitchell at 10%. So they're close enough where I don't really care one way or the other. But if that were to change between now and lock, I think going with the lower owned one makes a lot of sense if you're trying to decide between the two. I think Poeltl looks pretty good at 6,200. There are plenty of centers today. But one thing that I do like is that it seems like San Antonio is just not really in love with any of his backups at the moment. You've seen a couple of games in a row where Eubanks plays the backup center minutes in one half and Lansdale plays in the other half. That's not screaming to me that Pop is looking to get Jakob Poeltl off the floor for more minutes than he has to. So I think there's a chance that you get a couple of extra minutes from him at 6,200. White's been playing better lately. He's 6,500 on DraftKings, looks pretty decent there. FanDuel, he's a lot more expensive, so that's pretty tough. Kelvin Johnson at 5,400 is fine, probably plays 32 minutes. So nothing that really stands out here, but a bunch of guys that are like 10 to 15% owned, and I think that's about where they should be.
On to the Clippers?
Yep.
All right, so for the Clippers, Q tag on Paul George. That is going to be important. No Marcus Morris, no Isaiah Hartenstein. Serge Ibaka is probable. Kind of got to wait on Paul George because that's a pretty big piece. There's a lot of ownership coming to George and Reggie Jackson and Ivica Zubac on FanDuel. Ivica Zubac on DraftKings, though, 18% owned at 4,900. And I don't think Paul George's status negatively impacts that. So the question is this: what do you want to do with the Clippers before we get out of here?
Yeah, I was going to say on DraftKings, it's kind of nice because most of them are priced up to where, like, if George is in at 10.8, I don't really want to get there. If he's out, I don't care that much about paying 7,600 for Jackson or 6K for Kennard or 5,400 for Mann. Like, they'd all be reasonable, but I don't really care if I get to them or not. Where I'm interested, though, is in the front court. Zubac's at 4,900 going up against a center position where it's going to be a lot of Jakob Poeltl and then some combination of Eubanks and Lansdale. You could certainly see 28 plus minutes from him. Hartenstein's out, and Hartenstein's played well this year. So him being out basically means that it's likely that you're getting, especially with Marcus Morris also out, and then even more so if George is out, you're probably getting 48 minutes from Zubac and Serge Ibaka. That could be 28-20, which would make them both look pretty good. It could be 30-18, 32-16, in Zubac's favor. At 4,900, I do like getting there. And then similarly, Ibaka's only getting 4% ownership at 3K on DraftKings with power forward eligibility. My best guess is he plays something like 18 to 20 minutes, in which case he's mediocre. But if he plays a lot more than that, it would not be the first time this year that I've been surprised at how many minutes Serge Ibaka plays.
I don't have anything else for the Clippers. I want to give you this tweet right now. Today marks half of his lifetime in professional basketball for LeBron James. 6,752 days from birth to draft day, 6,752 days from draft day until today. Half of his life has been a professional basketball player.
And it makes me feel old because I still remember being in like 7th or 8th grade and like one of my best friends basically telling me who LeBron was, like when you're still in high school.
Yeah.
So like that makes me feel like it reinforces how long ago that was.
And Pacers reporter Scott Agnes had retweeted this. He said, and has exceeded all expectations. That's really crazy to think about. To be christened at 16 and check every single box to hit every mark. Basically, no one in their life does that. Like,
right.
Regardless of sports, I imagine we are not even like in that mark, and I'm loving everything that I do in life. So kudos to LeBron. That's wild shit.
Yeah. Like it's like Bryce Harper is the baseball comparison, and Harper's like, I think a lot better than people give him credit for, but like he's still
not chasm between those two.
Right. But he's still not like remotely in the conversation of best guy to ever play baseball.
No, it's still crazy. So kudos to LeBron for that one. Half your life as a professional basketball player. Adam, anything else before we get out of here? Turn this one over to the Live Before Lock crew.
No, that's it.
Alrighty, guys, hit that like button one last time. Let's jump over 500 likes. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. You're going to want to be here all the way up until 7:30 because there's still a ton of news to come in, and the NBA is crazy right now. So good luck tonight. Win some money. Back again doing it all tomorrow, but Live Before Lock is next.
The Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock show, sponsored by Yahoo, and I'm pretty excited to be joined here by Terry McBride. Terry, you and I don't usually do shows on Monday, but as such is the current nature of everything, our schedule had to get totally flipped around, just as the NBA's and NFL's did, so everything kind of got shuffled a little bit, but as a result, I'm with you. How you doing, man?
Good. Yeah, it's weird to be with you on a Monday. This is usually a bit of a slower day for me, but happy to jump in. And it's been an interesting shuffle just across the board with chaos in all sports right now, it seems like. So we're dealing with it on the NBA side, but yeah, it's all over the place. Got NFL coming up later on, and it's been a fun juggling act. Keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, so with that being the case, I guess I could read off some of the injuries that we're waiting on. We've got a lot of injury news throughout the day, but still some players that are listed as questionable. Joel Embiid, Paul George, Rashawn Holmes. They're all officially listed as questionable to play, as is Tyus Jones. John Morant is now expected to play. He's listed as probable. He was questionable earlier in the day. So still some stuff that could be moved around. But the one that I think is going to impact this show the most is going to be the injury news to Joel Embiid for a couple of reasons. Number one, that game's a 7:30 start time. It's the first game on the slate, so it's something we're going to get news on expectedly at some point during the show. Also, there is no Andre Drummond for the Philadelphia 76ers. So in previous games where we've seen Joel Embiid be a late scratch, we've gone to Andre Drummond as a potential value play. But I want to ask you, how are you viewing this Joel Embiid news with it being the first game on the slate?
Yeah, it's definitely the key piece that I'm waiting on. I was teeing that up for my answer. If you asked that just kind of open-ended, that was definitely going to be the spot to focus on. It still creates value, but it's not like Andre Drummond kind of value, I don't think. Paul Reed, definitely of interest in that situation. We've got him projected for just 1.4 minutes right now because we've got Joel Embiid in. So I think he becomes more interesting. And then Charles Bassey, also very interesting at 5,100 on FanDuel, but 3,500 on DK. Both of those guys better DK plays in my mind, but those would be the guys where I would expect the minutes to go. Bassey is the more interesting of the two, 1.24 fantasy points per minute so far versus 1.0 for Paul Reed on this season. So that would be the guy that I'd be most intrigued by if he lands in the starting lineup, but it's more of a DraftKings play. 5,100. I expect him to deliver value at that price, but it's not going to be the extreme value that we would get at 35. And then whatever minutes Paul Reed picks up at the dead minimum on DK, I think I would also be interested in.
Yeah, and then don't overlook Paul Reed's G League stats. You ever seen the numbers he puts up there? He scores like 50 points with 10 rebounds and 10 assists every game. Obviously, it never quite translates to the NBA, but he was the G League MVP last year, if I'm not mistaken. Any other kind of overarching thoughts you have on the slate? If not, we'll go into the position by position.
I think the other key piece of news is the other big man on that list, Rashawn Holmes. The guys on the last show were talking about it a little bit. That's one we'll probably get late with that game tipping off in the last hour of the night. So I think we won't have that one during the show, but I think that does have a bit of a trickle down effect through that Kings rotation. So there's question marks there, but that would be the other one that I'm kind of focused on out of the missing information so far.
Yeah, and then I just realized also something just to me. I hope this isn't the case, but who knows? We might not get that Joel Embiid news until after the game actually starts, like what happened the other day, which does set up some good live betting opportunities at the very least. But let's go position by position now, and we get started at the guard spot. And I think where we should start is just by talking about Steph Curry. Vastly different price point on FanDuel and DraftKings. On DK, Steph Curry's priced at 11,800. On FanDuel, though, he's priced at a much more modest 9,700. Terry, I do know that you were a little bit more of a FanDuel guy. I'm going to ask you about both, but we'll start by asking about Steph Curry on FanDuel. Is he your favorite overall player to pay up for on FanDuel? Because he is for me.
Yeah, that's where I'm targeting spending most of my money on this slate. I think 9,700 for Steph Curry, just outside of anything in a vacuum, that is just too low for this guy. So I don't care that he's owned by nearly 50% of the field. He's coming up as one of the most frequently optimal plays on the board. I believe he's number 2 right now. Among guards, he's number 2 behind Buddy Hield. I would much rather be way overloaded to Steph Curry, even at a much higher price than Buddy Hield, although I expect I'll have a lot of both of those players on FanDuel. A little bit less interested on the DK slate at 11.8, but I still think he's viable. He's coming up 15% optimal over there, 17% boom score probability. It's just a meaty raw projection too. You're talking about looks like about 8 points over the next most highly projected guards in just the raw point total in the median. And I think there's money to pay for him on this slate, particularly if you get some of those other values to emerge. So it's a play I'm very, very interested in. My favorite spend up of the day for sure.
Yeah, and we could talk about his price on DK, and I don't have him projected exceptionally well points per dollar. I have him projected somewhere around mid-50s fantasy points. Let me pull up the number I have for him. I have him for 55.3 fantasy points at 11,800 on DraftKings. Here is why I'm getting to him in my builds right now anyway. There's a lot of value and there's not really other guys to pay up for. So by default, I just kind of land on Steph Curry. You know, we've got Jason Tatum at 10,500. I kind of prefer getting to Steph Curry than him. We've got Joel Embiid at 11,600. Who knows if we're going to be getting him in or not? And then even if he is he going to play full minutes? So all that considered, we've got Steph Curry at certainly an overpriced tag, but there's still upside there. And I just don't know where else to spend my money when we have all of these guys that are such good points per dollar plays at the low end. It just kind of makes sense to go stars and scrubs, especially if more guys get rolled out. Is that kind of how you view that 11.8 price tag for Curry on DK as well?
Yeah, very much. And a way that I like to compare the price points on some of these guys, particularly when we're talking in position, but you can do it for the entire slate as well, is sort by salary and then look down the boom score probability column. And if we're doing that, Steph at a 17.4 boom score percentage is the top guy until we get down to 21.7% on a $7,700 Lonzo Ball. Those are obviously extremely different price points. So when we're talking about the top 5-6 guys in terms of pricing, out of everybody over 9K, let's say, Steph at 17.4, Paul George 5.1, DeJounte Murray 15.7 is the other guy I'd probably be most interested in, or LaMelo at 15.2. And then the other guys are single-digit boom score probabilities that are in that price range. So you're just getting more expectation, even at the inflated salary, of the potential for a ceiling game, and at least that median score around 53 is just very, very relevant to lineup construction today. So I do agree. I think he's worth the money on DK as well.
Yeah, and then the other thing to consider here is, given the way some of these slates have shaken up recently, where there's so many cheap guys that are getting big minutes that wouldn't normalize. I don't even know what the exact numbers. 78 players that are currently in the COVID protocols for the NBA. As a result, you just get all these cheap guys playing a bunch of minutes. Steph Curry doesn't have to go score the 65, 70 fantasy points we would normally think you're looking for at this kind of price point to get upside. If there's so many cheap plays that are viable, it's just the raw points become more important on the high end for me than the actual points per dollar salary. And I have him a little bit overweight to the field just because I don't find him that difficult to fit in. Now, I'm going to ask you about, just in general, other point guards when we're talking about the cheap end. So one of the main reasons that I've said I found it easy to get to Steph Curry is because there are these cheap point guards that are viable to us on this slate, where we have players like Alex Caruso at point guard, Javonte Green, although he's actually oddly small forward eligible on DK, although shooting guard eligibility on FanDuel. Who are some of the cheap guard options that stand out the most to you today?
That's weird. Javonte's not popping up for me in the sort that I did. Just curious why. Sorry. Anyway, going back to what you actually asked there. Are you talking point guard only, or were we covering?
No, just guards in general.
Guards in general. So we get Isaiah Joe with a 29.6 minute projection. Kind of stands out. He's a shooting guard on DK at the dead minimum. He's a point guard on FanDuel at 3,800. I like him on both sites, but it looks like we're giving him a lot more value on the DK slate, where that dead minimum price, he's not going to have to do very much as a guard play. 16% optimal right now, and a killer boom score probability, 27.2%. He's drawing positive leverage now. That might catch up as the news spreads around that there's a minimum price guy with that kind of a minutes rate on him. But I think that's a key value play. I think if you get Kobe White at 3,700, that could be a comparable play there, and maybe a bit of a pivot, although it looks like right now he's drawing more ownership than min price Isaiah Joe. So normally I would expect that to reverse, and we might see that reverse in later situations where the more expensive of those two plays ends up a little bit less owned. You can also play those guys side by side in the same lineup because Kobe White's point guard, shooting guard eligible. You've also got the util spot, of course, but I like to reserve that for different kinds of plays. Scrolling down the list, another guy, a guy I wrote up this afternoon, Damien Lee, I think is somewhat interesting as long as he's keeping that 25-ish minutes that we've got him projected for. If he slips back toward his 20-minute average for the season, I don't like him very much at all. But I think there's enough on the bone if he's getting a little bit of minutes bump here in the Golden State rotation. He's a 0.69 fantasy point per minute player for this season, 0.60 over the last 3, despite a little bit of a minutes uptick. So it's really uncomfortable in terms of saying like this guy's going to definitely go out and give this value. But it's also a play that nobody's really rostering. Single digit, below 5% ownership on both sites, and above a 10% optimal lineup rate on both sites. So we've got a nice little leverage play there that not a lot of the field is considering. He hasn't really gotten talked up all that much that I've seen. It's definitely a tournament play that could easily go bust, though. I don't love recommending that one, but it's on the board.
Related to some of these cheap plays from the Warriors, and it's something that I've struggled with today. How much are you considering the spread? Because I typically don't try to weigh or account for blowouts too much. But the Warriors are 14.5-point favorites. The Kings are decimated by COVID. They sucked already. So now you just got like, hey, here's a team that was already terrible. Now they have a bunch of guys out. They're playing the best team in the NBA, arrested best team in the NBA, because Andre Iguodala, Otto Porter, Draymond Green, Steph Curry all rested last game. So with the Warriors favored by 14.5 points, does that change your outlook on any of the value plays here? Is there anybody you look at on the Warriors be like, hey, this guy looks okay, and he might get garbage time run, therefore I'm higher on him?
Yeah, I mean, I think a guy like Lee could see a few additional minutes regardless of how the game script goes from that regard. If I'm looking through, I try not to overrate the blowout potential either. But if it does end up like that, any one of these guys, like a Gary Payton or even a Moses Moody, I'm not incredibly interested in Moody. Payton would become interesting because he's a 1.06 fantasy point per minute performer for the season. So if we see him get up over, we've got him projected at 17.9 right now. If he ends up in the mid 20s, I think that's definitely a viable value play there from among the guards. He'd probably be the one that I would keep my eye on amongst the guard positions. And then Damien Lee is also there, but we're kind of projecting him for around that kind of run right now with the 25.7 on him.
All right, so let's look at some of the other chalk options at the guard position, because I know people are going to want to know what we think about these players. One being Buddy Hield, who in our last round of ownership is by a pretty decent margin the most popular projected play over on FanDuel. Nearly 50% of lineups projected have Buddy Hield in them. Over on DraftKings at 5,800, we're projecting Buddy Hield for 30% ownership. And I don't have an issue with Buddy Hield as a points per dollar play. I certainly like him in cash games. Tournaments he's in my player pool. I'm just not getting to him quite as much as the field is. How are you handling an uber chalky Buddy Hield?
Yeah, I think I hate to say it, but I think it's good chalk. I've never done well with rostering Buddy Hield. I just, it's not that, it's not that I get it wrong going in, but it's that he gets it wrong for me, I think, when he performs on the court. But he's coming up just extremely, extremely frequently when I dash off the top, I've got crunches on both sites right now, just off the top, no changes, 300 lineups a piece. FanDuel, he came up in 99. He came up in all but one of them. And DK, he came up in 277 of them. So again, this isn't the lineups that I would actually enter, but I think it's interesting to get a feel for just what is if we're mashing together all just on a purely points per dollar, no randomness, no forced changes, who comes up the most frequently? And that answer today is unfortunately Buddy Hield. He's a 0.88 fantasy point per minute performer across the course of the season on 22.6% usage. Adam mentioned it earlier. The usage is weird with these guys. When we take some of the guys like De'Aaron Fox off the court, you don't see like massive upticks like you might expect. Buddy, while Adam was talking about it, I said, that can't be right. I jumped in there, and of course Adam was right, but I tried to see where that usage could be coming from and whether it ticks up. And in the configuration they're likely to have, it actually goes down from 22.6 to 19 and change this season. So it's really a question mark around the minutes. We've got him projected at 36.2. He saw 40 their last time out. He's averaged 35.3 over the last three. I think there's enough for him to do on the court. I think he could have, he could certainly deliver upside to the 0.8 that he's given us over the last three. So as an upside play, as a very affordable play with multi-position on both sides, who comes up frequently optimal, who's got approaching a 50% boom score on FanDuel, approaching 40% on DK, I reluctantly have to say I'm interested in Buddy Hield here.
Yeah, and to reiterate, I have him in my lineups. I'd say interested is a fair way to look at it. I just don't envision myself ultimately playing him quite as much as the 50% of the field on FanDuel or 30% on DK, especially assuming that we're going to be getting some more value plays as time goes on today. We've got a super chat here from Gabriel Meffrin. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is Brooks still worth his salary on FanDuel if Ja Morant plays? So the most recent news on Ja Morant is expected to play. Let me see if we got a tweet in here from News God about any kind of restrictions or anything on Ja Morant, because Morant coming, what's that?
I've not seen one. I was just saying. Yeah,
I don't see anything, nothing about a minutes restriction. Here's the actual tweet though. This was from Chris Harrington, who is a Grizzlies beat reporter, per Taylor Jenkins, that is the coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. Ja Morant is your standard game time decision, but he seems likely to play today. So game time decision for all intents and purposes, I'm considering him probable, therefore likely in today. So here's the impact of Ja Morant being in. Dillon Brooks is still going to take his shots because Dillon Brooks thinks the best player on the Memphis Grizzlies is Dillon Brooks. But there's obviously shots that are going to go to Morant here. And my assumption is if Morant plays here, he's going to have some sort of limitation. So we're not going to see 36 minutes, but I still expect a decent minutes allotment out of him. So looking at the current builds I have over on FanDuel for Dillon Brooks at 6,700, I have him in my player pool, but not that much different than the field. I think the 16% ownership on him is about fair.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm just looking at Wowie real quick. Only accounting for Ja. There's other guys, obviously, in and out here, but only accounting for Ja in 386 minutes this season with Ja off. Dillon Brooks sees 30.5% usage. If we put Ja back in, bear with me a half a second while Wowie updates for that contingency here. We see Dillon Brooks 485 minutes and 30.2% usage. So to your point, he will shoot whether Ja is out there or not. I'm perfectly fine with rostering him. And right now he's not rating out as one of the killer plays available, but 15% optimal on FanDuel, 20% on DK. That's what Ja projected in for 22.8 minutes. And with Brooks pulling a 33.1 minute projection, If it cuts into the minutes a little bit, I think it's still viable. I think the ownership would probably come in lighter than where we've got it projected. We've got it projected in the mid to high teens on both sites. So I think if we get the Ja confirmed in news, it'll probably trigger the reaction that person's question is based on. And I don't necessarily think that's correct here. So I would still be willing to play Brooks. I would maybe temper the expectations. Going to be a situation where we need the shot to go in. This whole team is interesting, though. Josh mentioned it on the previous show. Bunch of guys with around a fantasy point per minute for the season and over the last handful of games here. Looking at the entire list of 12 guys that we have projected to see minutes tonight, the team averages a 1.01 fantasy point per minute rate for the season across the board. That's inclusive of a 0.78 on Killian Talib, which is that's fascinating to me. This is an interesting team for DFS purposes.
Yeah, it's a team that doesn't play much defense. They play at a pretty fast pace, which is always going to just in general encourage more scoring, both in real life and fantasy production. The current total for this game is set at 220.5 points, which is, it's moderately high. It's the third highest on the slate. So a little bit above average. We've got the Warriors Kings game 220.5. The one that is the highest total is the Jazz Hornets game 237.5. Massive total there, which I guess we could talk about LaMelo just because I brought up the total for that game. LaMelo's fairly expensive today on FanDuel and DK. I do have a preference to roster Steph Curry over LaMelo Ball, but how do you feel about LaMelo as a potential pivot off of Curry?
I like LaMelo here. I think there's just raw scoring potential that's under-owned on both sites. He's coming in, in the last update, it looks like it might have gone up a little bit, but he's still around 10% on the FanDuel slate and only around 16% on the DK slate, where you see guys, Steph Curry, for example, upwards of 20% on DK, and like we talked about, over 45% on FanDuel. So as a replacement just for the raw scoring, I think LaMelo makes sense as a guy who could get there, could give you the same game as Steph. And he's priced a little higher than DeJounte Murray on the FanDuel slate I lost track of Murray, but he's priced a little bit higher on the FanDuel slate. On DK, looks like he's priced a little bit lower. So it's interesting site to site where you're getting that replacement value. But I think both those players, either DeJounte Murray or LaMelo Ball, is probably the spot that I'm going to go if I'm not going to Steph Curry for that pay up guard option.
Yeah, I think we're kind of in the same boat there. I am a little bit overweight to the field on LaMelo Ball right now. It's another situation where I'm concerned about the matchup to an extent. I'm concerned about the blowout risk, but the total is so high in that game. And it figures that if that game stays competitive, it's likely going to be on the shoulders of LaMelo Ball. Working through some of the...
Sorry to cut you off on your transition, Greg. It's also really quick worth pointing out, you can easily roster Steph Curry and LaMelo Ball on the FanDuel slate if you were so inclined. Same story would probably apply to DeJounte Murray, but I didn't try and hand build that one. I'm just playing a couple. Actually, it definitely would because Murray's cheaper. So I'm just playing a couple of lineups, and I have Curry and LaMelo Ball in both of them.
Fair enough. And one of the guys that makes it possible to get those two guys together is we have what's better than working at Awesemo.com. We have a chalk Alex Caruso night, which these are far and few between, but Alex Caruso projected for 40% ownership on FanDuel. Over on DK is projected for 28% ownership. What do you make of a popular Alex Caruso, who we are contractually obligated to talk about? And people don't know this. The amount of times we bring up Alex Caruso's name on shows, there's a little boost in pay for us. It's something that Alex asks us to do on the side. Alex Caruso, though, popular play. What are we doing with him?
Yeah, I like him. There's certainly enthusiasm for the Awesemo reasons, of course. The way that he rates out on both sites is interesting. He's pretty negatively leveraged. He's the most negative guard on the FanDuel slate, most negative guard on the DK slate in terms of our leverage score. I do still like the just value that he can provide cross positions. He's in that mid-range, and he's more toward the lower mid-range guys who's carrying a minutes projection upward of 30, has the potential to deliver a somewhat reliable shot at 30 fantasy points for you with upside to that. 25% boom score probability on the DK slate on a 28.2 median projection, 23% boom score probability on a 28.7 median projection on FanDuel. I just sweat the ownership a little bit because there are other value plays. We talked about a few of the $3,000 guys on the DK slate. They're not direct pivots, but it depends on what the delta would be between, like, all right, if I plug in this guy at a better value price, what am I buying in another spot? And does that make up the difference in what you're sacrificing from Caruso? So he's a like it, don't love it kind of play for me at the pricing.
Yeah, I think the real big factor for me that I'm getting to Alex Caruso, and the reason the field is as well, is there's no Zach LaVine in there for the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, I love the Bulls today, yeah.
Yeah. So even though we've seen some of these guys from the Bulls now be out for an extended period of time, the Bulls haven't played games. So we haven't actually seen what it means for some of these players to be out. But here's overall all the players that are in COVID protocols right now for the Chicago Bulls. Desanmu, Troy Brown Jr., Derek Jones is out, Zach LaVine is out, Alize Johnson's out, Matt Thomas is out. So we've got some of these teams where it's like even the backups that we thought would be playing extended minutes now in COVID protocol. So I think Alex Caruso plays a ton of minutes in this spot. Yes. The question just becomes, is it going to be a blowout playing a crappy Houston Rockets team? About 8.5 point spread. If we're looking at some of these games saying that there's too much blowout risk to look at some of these guys, then you're just taking all the games off the board, because 8.5 point spread for Bulls Rockets, 8.5 point spread for Memphis OKC, 12 points for the Utah Charlotte game, 14.5 points for Warriors Kings. Some of these games are going to blow out. I just don't know which ones.
Yeah, for sure. And back to the leverage point there with Caruso, it's fine if you're building with other pieces that are getting to positive leverage, you're differentiating elsewhere. It's absolutely fine to build him in. It's just I don't love a negative leverage play at that rate. Even seeing a ton of minutes, 0.87 fantasy points per minute on the season is perfectly acceptable at the 5,400 price, 5,100 price. 0.71 over the last 32.5 minutes per game. That's around where we've got him projected. So it's a bit of a variance play, and you're not getting different by making that weird variance play, right? So that's my only hesitation around it. If I sound like I'm being a bit cautious with it, but I do think it's valuable to build him into a lot of lineups and not really sweat the ownership as long as you're getting different elsewhere. And then to your point about the Bulls in general, I just really think there's a bunch of good plays on this team, from DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Vukovic. I think Kobe White is interesting, like I mentioned before, over on the DK slate, potentially as a better, different instead, not better, but a different kind of a play than Caruso. Kobe White, 3,700 with a 26-minute projection in that blowout type situation, or just in a situation where he gets extended minutes just by virtue of being shorthanded. We've got him projected as being a great play that compares favorably right now with Caruso for 3,700 with a 26-minute projection. If he lands at 30 and Caruso comes down to 30, that could flip on its head on that price. So it's a really interesting lineup to look at, and they're priced wildly differently on FanDuel, of course. So that's a lot less relevant over there.
All right. One other player I want to ask you about, and then we can just kind of open it up to talk about whatever other guards you want to fill in the blanks with. Tyrese Halliburton is going to be popular once again today on FanDuel and DraftKings. I get it. There's a lot of players out for the Kings. He's played really well as of late. His last couple of games have been some pretty substantial fantasy performance. Actually, his last three, 42, 47, and 54 DraftKings points in his last 3 games. So I can't deny that there's upside. But now with that said, I have a little bit of sticker shock when it comes to Tyrese Halliburton. 7,000 on ZK, 7,700 on FanDuel. I'm just not getting to him as much as the field because I do think the price tag has gone up a little bit too much for my liking. Could you talk me into Halliburton as a chalk play at all?
I think he's really viable. I think we might be a little light on our ownership projection today. We've got him projected 28.3 on DK, 24.9 on FanDuel. Coming off that big game, 51.3 fantasy points the last time out. To your point, over the last 3, averaging 1.27. He's been terrific, but the price is going up a little bit. I love the multi-position. I think there's room on that price tag still. I think he's a good enough player where he can continue this level of performance and keep giving us this result. And we might see the price go up even a little bit higher. It's the ownership that might concern me. Right now, it's efficient. If it goes up higher than what we've got projected, which I think is likely here, especially because he's an easy building block to put in. If you go to that star with Steph Curry and you don't go to a second star guard, you can build him in at that price without very much difficulty. And then the other value plays from his own team and some of the other guys on the board can slot into the small forward position, can slot into the multiple guard positions. So there's a lot of flexibility in builds today. Having gotten Halliburton right over the weekend, I'm happy to go back there again. I do think he's a good player. I do think there's points upside there and points per minute upside. I'm just a little bit concerned around the ownership on him. I wrote up Buddy Hield this afternoon though. So, I mean, what do I know? I'm going with the guy who's 50% owned. I do like the Halliburton play. It makes some sense.
All right. We've got big news here.
Uh-oh.
Big news, unexpected news. Time Lord is out. There's going to be no Robert Williams for the Boston Celtics today. So let's go talk about that piece of news first as we're sorting this out, guys. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we've got the NFL Live Before Lock show coming up after this for the doubleheader Monday Night Football. But all right, no Robert Williams. Now, my initial thought is Enes Kanter freedom. I assume he is free now. He's going to get unlocked from the bench. He's going to be pushed likely in the starting lineup. And I think he should now be somebody who I'm going to project really well. I'm once again assuming he starts. I'm going to project him as such. Here are the other players that are for the Boston Celtics today. So Robert Williams is out. Grant Williams is out. Josh Richardson's out. Jabari Parker's out. Broderick Thomas is out. Sam Hauser's out. Al Horford's out. And Juancho Hernan Gomez is out. There are not very many big men left for the Boston Celtics. What does this make you feel about Enes Kanter freedom?
I think that this is going to be Chat's opportunity. They've been looking for the spot to roster Enes Freedom all season, or at least since he changed his name. I think this might be the one. I think we can go there today. I'm just looking at it for big men in this lineup now. Who's left? It's like him and Bruno Fernando, I guess, is on this team now at the minimum. Bruno Fernando is 6'9", 240 pounds as a power forward center available on DK for the dead minimum. I guess he's going to see an uptick in minutes too. I'm just guessing at where that might go. Looking at the size of some of these guys, you might get the Tatum in the 5 role as the backup and not even worry about that. So maybe a bump to Tatum, although he's playing on a bit of a bulky ankle. So I'm concerned about that. You got to like the opportunity for Enes Freedom, a guy we know can go out and grab a boatload of rebounds, be efficient with putbacks and scoring around the rim. 1.06 fantasy points per minute in the limited role for the season, 0.84 over the last 3 games, 18.1 fantasy points in 21 minutes the last time out. We had him projected at around a point per minute today, and assuming that the minutes go up from the 18 we had him projected in, I think it's going to carry the play pretty significantly here. So I'm still interested in a lot of the, star / mid-range pieces around that. Like, I think Tatum's got definite value on this slate, assuming we're getting full run, which I think we can safely assume at this point. Marcus Smart, I think, is interesting in that Celtics rotation, and just, guys who are going to have more to do. So there are some weird pieces in this puzzle now.
All right. And we've got news on the other side of the game. Danny Green will play. Joel Embiid will play. Tyrese Maxey was ruled out earlier. I like getting some more of Joel Embiid now because here's the main reason that Enes Kanter Freedom has not been free. The reason he's been buckled to the bench over there is because he sucks on defense. He doesn't provide very much at that end of the court. He's a pretty substantial negative. This becomes a pretty easy matchup for Joel Embiid, who's now in. I was not really getting to him much before, but I'm going to be giving him an upgrade now that Kanter, I don't even, is his name Enes Kanter Freedom or just Enes Freedom? It totally messes me up when I'm uploading stuff to Fantasy Crusher. I don't know if you run into that issue as well, but does this change how you view Joel Embiid as well?
I was just basically waiting on Embiid, yes or no. And then I was going to become interested in Embiid just by virtue of the center plays that are available, the money that we've got to spend, the power forward eligibility for a lot of the other center plays that I was interested in. So yeah, fire away with the Embiid shares. The reason I was looking like this a second ago is because I picked up my phone to make adjustments to those lineups because I didn't account for Embiid in, but I had some direct pivots to make. So I don't think I'm going to be playing LaMelo and Curry side by side anymore. Probably going to try and get Embiid into these two. So yeah, definite interest there. And I'm not hearing any. Are you there? Did I lose you? I can't hear Greg.
You can't hear me?
Now you're back.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I don't know what happened there, but anyway, Joel Embiid, were you on the same page as me? You said, here's the last thing I heard. You said that you were waiting for the in or out with Joel Embiid, and then there was this moment of anticipation, and then I disappeared apparently.
That was the same experience I had when I ended my rant, in which I said, yeah, I'm very interested in Joel Embiid. I wanted to play Joel Embiid before just wanting to get that yes or no go news. I was interested if he was going to go, and particularly now in the matchup just makes it more appealing. I think he'll increase in ownership, but I think there's a massive projection there. And then I was just saying that I was making adjustments to my existing 2 lineups here, and I'm probably no longer going to go LaMelo and Steph in that lineup. I'll probably go Steph and Embiid and figure out how to pay for it.
And then Kanter over on FanDuel only has center eligibility. So does that mean that you would not have Kanter in those lineups? You'd be going with Embiid instead?
Yeah, I'm going to try to. I'm going to see how that does because I do think there's a lot of other value. So I'll see what as we're talking it through, I'll see where I need to sacrifice value to pay for that Embiid salary. Like I said, I took LaMelo out, so that pays for most of it. And then if I make one other change in here, which was easy, like I had Giddey in one of these lineups, So I can easily pivot that down to a less expensive shooting guard option and then pay, if I take those guys out, I've got 4,700 across a point guard and a shooting guard spot. So I don't think that like the value of putting Cantor into this lineup, I'll just actually do it while I'm talking about it, is nothing. Because why the hell isn't he coming up? Oh, because he's in his freedom.
It was a name. I have that issue every Celtics slate.
Yeah, I had to actually remember it. So that gives me a little bit more to spend at that last shooting guard spot. Like I put Freedom in, and then I put LaMelo back in, and then I could go from Giddy to Dort, Melton, Poole, or Bane for $300 that it saves me over the. I had it with the Philly backup in there with Paul Reed in there instead of Embiid earlier. So it's really in the lineup that I had. It wasn't giving me any additional value to go down from Reed over to Cantor. It was just going to be basically run back what I had. I'm more interested in making that pivot to Embiid now, I think. Second most probable player to give us a massive fantasy score on the board, I think.
All right. So I think we can move over to the forward position now. And I did notice that now that I'm getting to just a ton of Enes Kanter, he's 3,600 on DK. Also, one difference, DK versus FanDuel, obviously, is we could play multiple centers on DK. So I have the ability to play lineups that have Kanter and Embiid together. Over on FanDuel, my preference is going to be Kanter at center, Enes Kanter Freedom, however it is that your name matching works over there. To me, I think that Freedom is the overall best points per dollar play on the slate, and he is going to be my highest priority, even on FanDuel. There's only one center available to us. So we'll move over to the forwards. But first, shout out to our sponsor, Yahoo. And if you guys have heard about us talk about Yahoo, you know the deal that we have. We know how we keep Terry employed. You go sign up over at Yahoo, make your first deposit, enter a contest. You get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum that Terry very kindly does manually behind the scenes, and everybody's money. It actually comes out of Terry's wallet, the free Awesemo Plus membership. It comes right from Terry. However, we have even more now with our deal that we have over with Yahoo. If you sign up and use the promo code XMAS100, that's all one word, XMAS100, get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. So even more value if you go and sign up over at Yahoo right now. All right, let's move on over to the forward position. And the first thing I've noticed, Terry, as I'm rerunning my lineups with the increased exposure to our friend Mr. Freedom, I'm getting to a lot more DeMar DeRozan now. As is, I already liked getting to DeRozan with Zach LaVine out of the picture, but now I have this extra value piece to go to, and it looks like DeRozan is the guy who ends up being in my lineups the most. How do you feel about DeRozan, and is this also a situation where you think it makes more sense to get to him with the added value?
Yeah, one of my favorite spots on the board out of the entire slate today. I wrote him up in my article this afternoon. I think he looks spectacular in this situation. 51.8 fantasy points in 34 minutes the last time out over his last 3 games, averaging 1.52, 1.17 over the course of the entire season. No reason not to go to him with all the value on the board. You can fit him in small shooting guard, small forward on the FanDuel slate, power forward eligible on the DK slate for 9,300 for more money. I like him a little better with the flex and the salary on the FanDuel slate. So does the public, though. 33% owned versus 22% owned. Slightly negative leverage on DK, a little bit more negative leverage on FanDuel. I really don't care that much. He's in both of these hand-built lineups that I made. Definitely excited about the opportunity to roster him here.
Yeah, that's also, like I just said, I'm getting to a whole bunch from now. He's actually my favorite spend-up option on the slate. I like him more than Embiid. I like him more than Steph Curry. I like him more than Vucevic, who's also a viable payoff option on the slate. DeMar DeRozan is going to be the guy who is most frequently spent up for in my lineups. And then on the other side with the Bulls, we have Javonte Green, who has only small forward eligibility on DraftKings. We kind of talked about him in passing before, but he's really cheap on both FanDuel and DK. I assume he's going to have to play a whole bunch of minutes. He's also popular and generally not the best fantasy producer in the world. I'm still getting overweight to the field on him, though. How are you handling a chalky Javonte Green?
Yeah, he was coming up a lot in the previous crunch that I ran, but that wasn't accounting for the Cantor factor, which now I'm not entirely sure where it's all going to go. Because he's a $4,000 option, we just might not need that value depending on how it sets things up. I'll run a crunch in the background here in the next few minutes, but I think he's definitely a value play, right? At shooting guard, small forward on FanDuel for $4,000, 3,100 on small forward only on DK. I'm much more interested in that value, assuming that we need it. But we are talking about a guy who's been a 0.7 fantasy point per minute guy over the course of the season, all situations. That's on only 11.3% usage. So if there's the idea that maybe he sees a little bit of an uptick in usage, there could certainly be more scoring on the board for him. 0.80 fantasy points per minute in 35 minutes a game over the last 3. We're projecting him at 30.8 minutes for the night. I definitely think there's enough there for him to produce. The question becomes the negative leverage. Is he our favorite value play at negative leverage versus some of the others that are at a little bit less leverage? And I think the answer to that is no. I think I'd rather go to some of the more positively leveraged, or at least closer to like efficient ownership guys from the same salary tier. But I definitely think he's easily comparable to one of those guys. And I wouldn't say somebody was wrong for playing him over one of those guys.
So then I'll ask you, and maybe the answer is just nobody, and there's enough value you could save money in other positions. But who do you view as the forward pivot to Javonte Green if you don't like him quite as much as the field?
So it was more coming from some of the other spots, but I did mention earlier in the show, Damien Lee from the Golden State side, more of a dart throw in terms of his production. Although you are talking about for the season a 0.69 guy versus a 0.70 guy. So maybe the difference isn't really as stark as it might seem. But for 3,800, there is a salary uptick there on the DK slate. It's a downtick by $100 on the FanDuel slate, shooting guard only. But I think that's at least a somewhat viable tournament pivot. Again, I don't love it, but that's why he's at 3% ownership on FanDuel and 4% ownership on DK, because nobody's comfortable making that play. But when we're talking about guys who for the season have produced somewhat similarly, and we've got them projected for somewhat similar run, Javonte Green getting about 5 extra minutes in the projection. So maybe it's not that similar, but there is the opportunity for Lee to see about similar minutes, I think, that we might not be accounting for in the median projection that we're putting out there. So I think he makes some sense. You could look to some of the Philly pieces still. I think they can make some sense there. But as a standout value play, when we're talking about just this board, we're looking at forwards only. Javonte Green makes a ton of sense. Like I said, you're not wrong for going to him. It's just a little bit of a leverage concern on a short slate.
If I had to pick one guy who would be the most direct pivot for me, it would be Otto Porter, who I am going to assume is starting for the Warriors today due to the players they have out. There's no Andrew Wiggins for them. He's been added to the COVID protocol. So I think that Otto Porter moves into the starting lineup. He also rested last game, which maybe gives him a little bit longer of a leash. I still like Otto Porter overall as a player. Generally, his minutes haven't been super high this year, which definitely caps his upside. But considering the players that are out for Golden State, no Andrew Wiggins, no Jordan Poole, I think we could see somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes from Otto Porter. And that does make me like him quite a bit as a value option. Current ownership projections on him. And I'll refresh to see if we have a more recent one.
Yeah, let me do that too, actually. That's a good idea.
Good timing. We have one from 1 minute ago. Otto Porter is projected for 16% ownership on the DK slate. Over on FanDuel, he is projected for 25% ownership. I don't have issues with those numbers. I think that Otto Porter is a pretty good pivot play relative to some of the other chalky cheap options today.
Yeah, definitely. I think we want that starting news and that rotation news from Golden State for sure. We've got time to work on that one. If we plug in one of the values and it turns out to be the other one that's important, I think you can make some swaps and not really be in too much trouble with the overall nature of the roster. We've got Porter projected at a 21-minute run for the night, and he looks in the middle of the board by optimal lineup rate. He's single digits optimal on both sites, getting a lot more ownership than that, but it sounds like it came down as of the last update. So he's going to catch back up in the leverage column. So I don't dislike that play by any means. 3,900 on FanDuel is small forward, power forward, 37 on DK, a little bit more appealing, same positioning.
Where are we at with injuries now? Who are we still waiting on today? So we have Paul George is questionable. There's no official word on John Morant, but the last soundbite we got from coaches, and you know what I like to say about coaches, they are dirty, filthy liars. So we can't always take everything they say as gospel, but Grizzlies head coach did say that he expects John Morant to play today. So Paul George questionable, Rashawn Holmes questionable. Those are really the two that I think are going to impact lineups the most significantly today. Terry, looking through your lineups, who are the forwards that you're getting the most exposure to of the players we've not yet talked about?
Bear with me just 1/2 second. Let me update these minutes in here. The crunch is completely irrelevant at this point.
Your half second is up,
well,
Terry.
I was talking through it. I was talking through with filler and reserving my half second for when I needed it. But yeah, I think I can't do this. I gotta change this. Hold on. I think the crunch that I ran is completely irrelevant now. So I'm just going to drop in these updates here real quick. We'll get back to the forward sort here. And boom. All right, now we can talk. Taking a look at some of our most recent run on the optimal rate. The Kings forwards, where we have significant minutes uptick, are still both very interesting. Buddy Hield and Harrison Barnes are coming up quite frequently. Javonte Green will be coming up a decent amount in the next crunch I run. Dillon Brooks from the Memphis side of things, who we kind of talked through with the jaw thing before, I think is still relevant on the board. A lot of the other guys that are coming up, Tatum from the star level, I think is definitely interesting here. 10.5 is a hefty price tag to pay. Even with the latest update, it looks like he didn't get a major uptick in his optimal lineup rate on the DK slate. A little bit more interesting probably on FanDuel, where he's only 99 across small forward and power forward. So I do like Tatum, and with the opportunity to, see around 40-ish minutes, we're projecting him for 37. I think there's upside to that. So I think there's definitely interest there. My one lingering doubt would be around on a bulky ankle. Does he really have that 40-minute upside? But I think if he's going out there, I think he's going to be good to go. A lot of the rest of this is just kind of coming up as mix and match type pieces across, like there's some Miles Bridges that would probably be interesting, but a lot of just kind of swappable parts. Jayshawn Tate, I think at 6,100 is somewhat interesting on the FanDuel slate. A little bit more limited by only one position on the DK slate. We're talking 16.7% optimal versus 9% optimal. So there's a bit of a downgrade there, but he's a positive leverage. I think there's at least a little bit of interest for a guy who's around a fantasy point per minute performer.
Yeah, so the one guy we did not mention there that deserves to be in the mix for me is Harrison Barnes, who I view as a good pivot off of guys like Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield. And it's not that Barnes isn't picking up ownership. He's just picking up less ownership than those two. And for the most part, he's been the best fantasy producer of the three over the course of the season. So with Harrison Barnes compared to Tyrese Halliburton, you're getting a price discount on DK. You're also getting an ownership discount. Over on FanDuel, when you look at Harrison Barnes, once again, he's 6,100. He's going to be fairly popular, but compare him to a Buddy Hield, who you could play at small forward. Buddy Hield at 5,100, he's projected for 45% ownership now in our most recent run. You're getting Harrison Barnes at 30%. Barnes, like I said, has been the better fantasy player this year. So I'm actually liking Barnes the most of those Kings players. Do you feel the same, or are you still getting to more of Buddy Hield and Tyrese Halliburton?
Probably getting a little bit more Buddy still, just because Buddy's 1,000 less than Harrison Barnes is on the FanDuel slate. Rather, they're a lot more comparable on the DK slate, where you're talking about a $200 price difference. So on DK, I would probably play that exact game where I'm going with the much more positively leveraged player at much less raw ownership. They come up around the same amount optimal. So I think that makes a ton of sense on DK. On FanDuel, they come up. You can still play the ownership and leverage game with going to Harrison Barnes, but you've got to figure out a way to pay for it. And I don't love figuring out ways to pay for Harrison Barnes. A 0.89 fantasy point per minute for the season, a 0.84 for the last 3 games. Definitely going to be run there. Definitely going to be in contention. He was, by the way, the second guy I mentioned. So he definitely is on the board here. I just don't, like I said, love figuring out how do I find an extra $1,000 to get to Harrison Barnes. He's not that player to me.
Is to me. I'm definitely afraid of that potential blowout risk. And like I said, also, I just like that he's projected for less ownership than guys like Buddy Hield and Tyrese Halliburton. So I do like the little bit of leverage we're getting there, because obviously every bucket that Harrison Barnes scores, every shot he takes is coming away from those guys' fantasy point totals. Anything else at the forward position that we should be mentioning here?
Chimezie Metu has eligibility at power forward for 4,700 on the DK slate. So I think that's somewhat interesting. I'm a lot less interested in him as a center only on the FanDuel slate, but he's on DK, going to have some viability. And then another guy who's still drawing a ton of ownership on the FanDuel slate, because he only cost 7,000, is Tobias Harris. Even with Embiid in, with the various pieces of news we've gotten, still coming up, it looks like around 30% optimal, 30% boom score, over owned to that at 42 and change percent. I'm not getting a ton of them like I kind of thought I would when I saw that price earlier in the day. I think he's just X'd out by a lot of other plays going in and out of the value range and guys who are more highly priced and highly projected than him. But he's at least interesting to me at that price. At 8,700 on the DK slate, he's a lot less interesting. 10% optimal, 10% boom score, efficiently owned. He's not a negative leverage play on that slate at single digit ownership. He could deliver value at that price, but it's a lot more dicey of a proposition. So worth mentioning at least, but I'm not in love with that play.
All right, let's hit on some of these super chats. We got a couple of these that came in while we were chatting about the rest of the forwards. First from Orion, top 3 pay-up options for FanDuel GPP with respect to ownership. Well, aren't that many of them to choose from. So it is going to be, to me, before it would have been Joel Embiid as one, but now that I like Cantor so much at center, I think that kind of makes it less so for me.
Well, Curry's number 1, right?
What's that?
Curry's number 1, right?
Yeah. So
9,700.
It's going to be for me Curry, DeMar DeRozan. Those are definitely my 1-2.
With you on both of those.
As the third, I think, well, it's tough as the third then because there's nobody else I'm getting a ton of, but I would say LaMelo Ball would be third.
I like that call a lot. I think for me, it would probably go to Joel Embiid. I think there's just enough ways that you can put this together with the values that we've got at guard and forward spots that it makes sense to include Embiid, regardless of, I mean, it's not regardless of, it's in spite of the massive optimal lineup rates that we're getting on in his freedom now, coming up 30.2% optimal. The leverage score hasn't caught up with the 60% boom score probability on him, but that's a 60% boom score against a nice 28.7 median projection and a $3,700 salary. So they're very different types of plays, but I do still think if I'm going to pay up, I like to get to star players, and I give Embiid star a little bit more shine than some of these other guys. So for me, I'm getting to Embiid there as my third favorite pay up option.
Right, another super chat here from Gabriel Meffrin. He's asking Tobias Harris or Draymond Green for last man in on FanDuel. I have these guys projected for almost
probably.
I have these guys projected for almost the exact same amount of fantasy points, but I'll go to Tobias Harris just because of less blowout risk.
Yeah, a little bit more secure in the minutes, less blowout risk. I'm just looking. Oh, there's Draymond. So yeah, the way Alex has it projected out, he's got Tobias projected for 5.5. Let's call it 6.5 rather fantasy points more than Draymond. So that's interesting. I'm wondering. I might not have caught the right update. I'm not sure if that's changed with the Philly news, but yeah, that's kind of a toss-up. But there is a lot more ownership on Tobias Harris than there is on Draymond. It's basically double. So if you need to make your lineup different, the leverage is not different. The leverage is a -7 on Draymond, -7.6 on Tobias Harris. But if you just need less raw ownership for a play that's basically the same, then I think you can go to Draymond there.
Center time. Let's talk about these centers, Terry. But first, guys, do us a favor. Like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel because it's free content. It helps me out. It helps Terry out. It helps Jordan out. We haven't shouted out Jordan, who you guys can't see, but it's okay. We can't see him either because he's in the pitch dark. He's got a little bit of lighting behind him. He's got a Christmas tree that's lighting him up, which I was stunned to find out is not an actual tree. I thought that was a real tree that was on his counter. But it helps Jordan out a ton. So like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Center position. Canner's in Canner and his Canner freedom basically in all my lineups today. He's my favorite overall play on the slate. So to me, that's kind of a no-brainer, particularly on DK. FanDuel, a little bit different of a story, just because Napi isn't the best points per dollar play on the slate, but you can only play one center. So I do think it's reasonable to make lineups with some other guys, such as Joel Embiid or Rudy Gobert. DK, though, we can play multiple, kind of a no-brainer to get to. Do you have any counter argument or pushback against rostering a bunch of Cantor freedom?
No, I think it makes a ton of sense. Like I was saying, when we first brought him up, he's a guy that we've seen produce in this exact kind of a role where he's a value player, where a ton of minutes suddenly opened up. He can go out there and grab 15, 20 rebounds in not that much time. He's a terrific rebounder, 20.3% rebound rate on the season, 53.4% true shooting. He's only seen 15.8% usage, and he's got a 1.06 fantasy point per minute rate over the course of the season. It's a limited role. He's played 11.7 minutes per night, so we're not talking about a ton of time on the court, but he's certainly capable of producing. And if we remember back to other opportunities that he's had, there's a reason that people ask about him when we come up with these situations where he might see minutes. Like I was saying, tonight's the night where we think he's really going to have that opportunity to see some minutes. So this is your opportunity. Fire away on Mr. Freedom. And by the way, you said that before, Mr. Freedom. That just makes him sound so much more appealing. Like it's such a bold, like awesome superhero kind of a name. So that just made me want to roster him even more. So the opportunity cost is the only thing stopping me on the FanDuel slate.
Captain Freedom. So we've got Captain Freedom on the top end. Here's what I was getting to a lot today that I'm kind of upset I'm not getting to as much now. Ivica Zubac. So there is no Hartenstein for the Clippers right now. And Hartenstein was starting to play a pretty significant role for Los Angeles. And that was taking away from the amount of minutes that we were seeing Zubac get. But now that we're taking Hartenstein out of the picture, he's dealing with an ankle injury, not going to play today. Unclear how long he's going to be out. I guess maybe Serge Ibaka could play some more minutes, but the guy I'm really looking to here is Zubac. How do you see the minutes going in the front court for the Clippers now? And do you think it's going to be Zubac, or is there reason to get to Serge Ibaka as well?
Yeah, I think out of those two guys, I would probably just rather get to Zubac. I just don't think it's going to come up all that frequently for me. He's a different play on FanDuel, 5,500 center only. He's just kind of a blocker on FanDuel, 3.5% optimal, 13.9% boom score, and he's drawing negative leverage. He's almost triple his optimal rate in terms of the ownership. That's still only around 11%, so it's not egregious, but it's definitely coming up less frequently than we're finding him in the optimal lineup. He's more interesting on DK, where you can roster two center only guys at the same time, like you were saying before, around 10% optimal, 4,900, but still a lot of the field getting to that play. 17.3% of the field leaves them in a negative 8.1 leverage score. So just with the other emergent values at center and, kind of wanting, if I'm playing two centers, I don't know that I want to go to Zubac at kind of a value price and then Kanter and then sacrifice the opportunity to roster like an Embiid or even a Vukovic or somebody like that from a higher price tier. So it would be a lower priority play for me, but I do think there's at least the consideration of it having some value.
We did get a question from Legalized in our Discord channel. What are the odds that Holmes plays? I kind of think he's more likely to play than sit at this point. It's not, at least, I'm no doctor. Not everybody knows this, but I do not have an MD. That's only Adam Schur that does around here in these basketball streets. But Rashawn Holmes has just had an eye injury, some sort of eye infection that's kept him out for 2.5 weeks or something like that at this point. He's continued to be listed as questionable. I think that we're going to see Rashawn Holmes play today. So I have him in right now. Do you have any specific feelings on Rashawn Holmes being in or out?
No real insight. It seemed like he was more likely to play, as like you mentioned, it wasn't like it was a leg or anything like that too. So if we get him, we can probably expect full run from him. We've got him projected at 26 minutes. We've had him in all day. That leans me a little bit more toward that side, but it's a situation we can wait on. He's 6,200, so it's easy enough to switch him out on the DK slate. He's 6,600 with multi-position on FanDuel, so it's even easier to switch him out if you land there. That said, with the realistic expectation of the minutes, projection of the expected minutes, he's not coming up all that often in terms of the optimal rates, single-digit optimal, single-digit boom scores on both sites. He's just kind of projected for around what he is and priced for around what he is. So I'm not all that interested. It would probably create a more interesting situation if he were out.
Yeah, I agree with you. If he plays, he's not someone I'm going to be rostering. If he's out, though, guys like Metu get more minutes. And then there's also, I don't think I'm going to be playing any of the super low-end Kings guys in that situation, but Metu would be the one who benefits the most, in my opinion, if Holmes misses another game. There's somebody else I want to ask you the center position, and that is Nikola Vucevic, who we've seen from him as of, this entire season, really. The opportunity's been there. His shot have just not been falling. But I do think there's opportunity for him to maybe start finding his jump shot going forward. The team's going to be leaning on him, at least in the short term, with Zach LaVine out. I was getting to him a whole bunch until recently when we got the Kanter Freedom news. Once we got Captain Freedom in play for us, I just didn't really find the need to roster Vooch all that much. In my player pool, I'm now underweight to the field. I was overweight before the Boston Celtics news with Robert Williams being out. Where do you see Vooch in the picture of this slate now that we have so much value at center?
Yeah, I mean, Captain Freedom might be one of those ironic supervillain nicknames because he seems to be stealing quite a few shares of ownership here from Vukovic specifically on my FanDuel crunch. So, yeah, that's one. Maybe it ends up being an under-owned play. We had him projected for 25% ownership earlier, 15.8% optimal on the FanDuel slate despite center-only eligibility. He was a negative 9.2 leverage play. So I was getting to him despite some kind of heavy ownership. If he becomes lower owned in the next little bit, that's kind of intriguing to me. It's not like we've got a lot of time to work with here, but that becomes a little bit intriguing for me for a guy who I agree. I think he's going to turn things around. 47.4% true shooting percentage, despite that 1.13 fantasy points per minute on the season. Last season, 29.2% usage, 1.38 fantasy points per minute. So the true shooting's taken a hit. The usage is taken a hit as well. 23.3% usage for this season. So that explains a bit of a decline in the fantasy points per minute, but with the scoring potential to go up, with the shooting ability potentially trending back toward where it's been, I think he's really interesting. He contributes in assists, 16% assist share, 15.6% rebounding. So he's a multi-category kind of a guy when he's shooting right. I really like that play. And if the ownership comes down to more level with the optimal lineup rate, I like it even better. But it's just a matter of how many shares of the higher end center and how many shares of the value centers am I willing to sacrifice for it. That's the tough part.
Yeah, it's the opportunity cost is a little bit too steep for me. I'd rather just go up to Joel Embiid at this point if I'm paying up for a center. So once again, Vooch is in my player pool. I just have about half as much exposure as the field has right now. Currently on FanDuel, he's projected for 17% ownership. That's steep for me. When we have guys like Captain Freedom, when we've got Joel Embiid that I'm trying to prioritize, it just really lessens the amount that I could get to Vucevic. Same goes over on DK. He's projected for over 20% ownership, even with this newfound value at the center position. People are still rostering a whole bunch. I'd rather play DeMar DeRozan at 9,300 for the exact same ownership on DK when there's just less positional value at the forward spot than at center. So who are you getting to more between DeRozan and Vooch?
DeRozan for sure. I'm just running a new crunch here in the background, but DeRozan was one of my top plays of the day, and I was looking to get some more of him than Vooch overall earlier, and that has not really changed here. In the current crunch that I'm running, same story, just right off the top, no changes. We're out toward the 100 lineup mark, and Enes Freedom has landed in 100% of the center spots on FanDuel. So the value there is extreme, and people are going to be going to him a lot. So I just don't see myself, if I'm sacrificing that value at the center spot, I think it's kind of exactly what you said. I'm going to be going to Embiid instead of Vooch. But I think there is the idea that the field does that too, and you get different by going to Vooch. I should throw that in.
All right. So really quick, we have to answer this. This will be a super chat to finish the show. But so quick answer for JR here. Last two in his cash lineup, Caruso and Draymond, or Halliburton and Bogdan for FanDuel cash. I think for cash games, you really should be playing Caruso today just because he's going to be so popular. He's projected for 36% ownership. He's probably going to be north of 50% ownership overall today on FanDuel for cash games. So go ahead and play the Caruso side in cash. How about for you? Caruso and Draymond, or Halliburton and Bogdan?
Yeah, for me, that would be Caruso and Draymond as well. Bogdan was not a player I was really considering for very much of anything. So to me, that just takes him out of consideration for cash. Cash, I just go toward our optimal lineup rate and kind of build super chalky and don't really sweat it in the rare instance that I'm playing cash. But yeah, I would strongly go there just by virtue of the fact that both of those guys are ranked fairly well toward in let's say top 20 in our optimal lineup rate category. Caruso top 15.
Yeah, and I just view Caruso as a must play in cash game. But that takes us to lock. Guys, let freedom ring. Good luck today. Do us a favor on the way out. Hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around. We've got NFL Live Before Lock coming up after this.